Overwhelmed with work, he shows how he fell unconscious sitting at the desk, correcting his boss's mistakes. His daily commute to work is a continuous miserable crush of bodies in the morning train. He vows to himself that he will never become as terrible a boss as his own. Exhausted from overtime, he barely makes it to the last train home. He is so tired that he cannot even open his favorite books, only the meowing of his cats responds. Lying in his small bed, he longs for the quiet, peaceful serenity of his hometown. Suddenly his eyes snap open sharply, and shock and confusion freeze in his gaze. He wakes up very small, buried in a pile of pillows on a huge, luxuriously decorated bed. In the luxurious room, his gaze falls on everything around, and his head spins confusion and this, what the? He looks at the crystal-top candlestick, feeling that the situation is too strange. Raising his gaze to the high ceiling, he froze in shock, seeing his own tiny hands. The quick panel shows a blurred trail of movement as he sets off. He stirs under heavy blankets and wonders if he somehow managed to shrink in size. A little boy peeks his head over the edge of a gigantic bed. His eyes look through a large arched window at an unfamiliar world. He sees a medieval city and does not understand where he has ended up, until suddenly a voice calls his name. It immediately struck his memory, warning of danger, and brought back a recollection of how he used to just whine. He marvels at the incredible view of the garden and enters a completely bewildered state up to total astonishment. Till is stunned, he cannot comprehend how a 2-year-old child learned to speak so fluently. Struck by her sudden appearance, he asks who she is and she freezes in shock. The young boy internally clarifies, he is not almost, he is already almost 30. A close-up on his face shows how he comprehends the huge age difference. His brain spins wildly when he contemplates the possibility of reincarnation and suddenly realizes he has 2 sets of memories. To test his theory, he asks the maid if her name is Till and she beams in response. Continuing the investigation, he then asks if his own name is Van Ferdio. He correctly names his father and brothers until he begins to praise him for being gifted. She is impressed that he knows the names of his brothers, he rarely ever sees them. Van sits on the bed, arms crossed, staring thoughtfully, trying to make sense of the new reality. The scene shifts to the formal dining room, where his stern father, Marquis Yalpa, is eating. His 3 older brothers, Mercia, Jard, and Sesto, sit at the long table. In this quiet hall, only the clinking of cutlery on plates can be heard. They show a person blowing on their food to cool it before eating. Van sits in a high chair, one of his maids brings him a spoonful of food. He is pampered by several maids who praise him for how well he eats vegetables. Inside, he cannot imagine, could this really be a cabaret club, and around him women clinging and fluttering with flattery. He comically thinks that he would gladly pay 30,000 yen for such a level of service. Putting jokes aside, he changes his expression, becoming thoughtful and serious. The mark, which we call on his second son, Jard, he receives with a startle at sudden attention. His father demands that his sons say exactly what they plan to learn during the day. They explain it is a family ritual to report plans at lunch and progress at dinner. Having listened to the elder son, the mark turns his doubtful gaze to Sesto. Sesto enthusiastically announces that his plan for the day is to study magic. After that, Marcus's gaze stops on Vanya. He usually does not focus on him. The majestic man asks his 2-year-old son what his plans for the day are. Van calmly replies that he will start with studying national culture and history. His father breaks away from food and raises his gaze, on his face pure surprise. Older brothers Avina stared at him. Their faces were masks of complete shock. A simple panel transition changes the atmosphere. The Marquise bursts out laughing at Gardy and proclaims Van magnificent for the 2-year-old child. He confidently states that Van has powerful fire magic the same as him and as his late wife. He tells Van that he awaits his magical aptitude test when he turns 8. In this world filled with magic, a person's magical potential is crucial. The Marquis looks intently, his gaze overflowing with hope for his youngest son. It turns out that nobles desire above all either elemental combat magic or healing magic. After the explanation, a simple transitional insert between panels follows immediately. Van notes that the Fairtheo family prides itself on its powerful offensive fire magic. He calls the technologies of this world medieval. Gunpowder exists, but magic prevents it from fully developing. The most important and defining feature of this new world is, above all, magic. He recalls he is in the kingdom of Skudgerea, where his father was recently appointed Marquis. In a later scene, Van asked Till about sea travel and learned that magic beasts attack ships. He is fascinated by the very presence of monsters, and he understands the age of exploration has not yet come. Till tells about the existence of other races, elves and dwarves, who keep to themselves and live alone. Fearing that the information is too complicated, the young Lord Vognson wanted to ask again if he does not want to sleep. Van politely declines, assures them that he is fine, and that he asks questions because he wants to learn. The maids are embarrassed by his mature manner, but agree that his questions are fine. After that, he asks about magical artifacts and learns that some stones can store power. Confronted with silence in his ear, the maids are surprised. No nobleman has ever spoken to them so gently. They unanimously decide that he is a true prodigy and does not behave according to his age at all. The head butler, Esparta, lashes out at Van, pounding his palms on the table and demanding answers, checking his knowledge. Van recognizes the majestic man as the great butler, the very one who served his father for years. Despite the fact that Sparta scares with a terrifying look, Vanna insists that he can speak well and listen well. When Vanna is asked about the alphabet, he admits that he is not very skilled in it yet. He says he can add but freezes as soon as it comes to the question of how to subtract. Esparta tests him, raises 2 and 3 fingers to him and asks what the sum is. Then he asked Van to subtract 2 from 7, and Van answered correctly. After a spontaneous quiz round, a heavy silence hung in the room for 10 seconds. Esparta makes an unexpected decision to personally teach Van twice a week. The following lessons were hellish, and Van wondered if his mentor, who did not blink, was not an android. He even suggests that the Spartan might be a golem or undead because of the exhausting lessons. Over the next 2 years, he spent his days immersed in study and research. At 4 years old, he takes up fencing. May demonstrates the correct strike. His quick reflexes cause admiration among the maidservants, and he compares this feeling to flirting. Mag shouted loudly with delight and decided that he had paid as much as 50,000 yen for this pleasure. A cheerful maid playfully calls him by name during a training sparring with swords. With a sharp movement, FWING, she lowers the wooden training sword onto him. She stands triumphantly with the sword, boldly declaring victory over Lord Van. From the force of her strike, she comically falls backward, laughing heartily. Another maid grabs the winner and sternly reminds her that attempting to deceive a noble person is a crime punishable as treason. Other maids agree, such audacity towards a nobleman is a serious crime that cannot go unpunished. Van approaches the frightened maid and gives a soft but firm slap on the forehead. He declares that it is all over, and the relieved servants stammer their agreement through tears. After 6 months of training, the maid with tears in her eyes sincerely apologizes for her former audacity. Van recalls his past life experience with judo and other martial arts. At 5 years old, he already begins to fight duels with boys older than himself with a training spear, a blunted sword. He recalls the judo principle, to break the opponent's stance to gain an advantage. He understands that the philosophies of both judo and karate coexist in fencing. His current opponent is a boy at least 10 years older. He is taller and has a longer reach. Van Cully analyzes the measured movements of his opponent and confidently thinks he can decipher his strategy. During sword training, young Lord Van emerges victorious, self-assured, and everyone praises his skill. Other young boys quietly whisper, Van is strange but approachable unlike his reclusive brothers. His victory attracts the attention of the deputy knight commander, the key figure in the house. With impressive sharpness, he politely demands that the young boys show him their hands. The commander inspects Van's soft, uncalloused palms, lingers on the long nails, and looks with a thoughtful expression. After the inspection, Van apologizes confusedly and promises to get his act together when he is older. Dee complains about Van's lack of training, but Van explains he has no free time because he is studying. Van is shocked when he learns from Dai that his academic workload is far from normal. Understanding that Van is overdoing the load, the Dee enthusiastically suggests intervening so that we can train more in fencing. Considering that Van's teacher is a fool, DeVos decided to make the boy a legendary knight. Van simply cannot recover from how the commander, with incredible tension and complete seriousness, announced his new goal. He mentally calls his scientific mentor Esparta the big brain among his 2 mentors. Van decides that he likes both swords and learning and sets about diligently improving both disciplines. De grumbles but agrees, insisting he will personally oversee Van's sword training. Seeing this new arrangement, Van lets out a nervous chuckle, and through it, a slight doubt appears. The commander's tough training regime starts with the order to do 100 pull-ups, continuously gives commands for 100 deflections and 100 striking blows. Van is already exhausted from overstrain, breaks down and tries with all his might to keep up with this insanely fast pace. Limping on his legs, he begs to be arrested, insisting that all this time he was just running. DeBello says he can rest while he himself rests and promises to do exercises together with him. Completely exhausted after the full-force blow, Van falls unconscious, thinking that his coach is a demon. Dini astically acknowledges Van's request for rest time, and a bright idea flashes in his mind. He absurdly shows that rest means holding a sitting pose at level, just hovering above the chair. Van's attitude towards the mentor changes. He realizes the commander is not a demon but an idiot. The subordinates laugh at the commander's stupid definition of rest while he demonstrates the exercise. Other soldiers call out from afar, encouraging Van and shout to the commander, "Don't rush." A maid brings Van a towel and praises his hard work as he finally leans back on the bench. A cheerful maid he once spared tells him, seeing him work so hard is truly wonderful. Van notes that despite all the mess, every day since his rebirth has truly been pure pleasure. Filled with a deep sense of satisfaction, he vows to become the best nobleman of all time. A dark flash forward highlights Sparta's deep disappointment, his ancient warning echoes threateningly. Van's contented life is abruptly cut short. A dark figure disappears from his sight. The plot resets, 2 years have passed, and a van operates in the bustling city for 6 years. The cannon cart is struck by a lively crowd, searching for people who are watching and finds few interesting ones. A recognized voice calls him by name, capturing attention with a stern look. From a high balcony, the maid offers him to go to the city market for entertainment. Van reflects on his rebirth as the son of Marcus and on the hellish daily torment that followed. This panel is a texture, so there is no description to give. He recalls rumors about his adult-level combat skill training aimed against older boys. He confirms this with a tired smile, implying that he stands out too much. His maid playfully teases him, suggesting that his genius might lead to inheriting the entire house. Van reacts with nervous laughter, realizing how dangerous the consequences of her innocent words are. He knows in the noble world the strongest survive and the heir takes everything. He fears becoming the target of a murder conspiracy woven by his own ambitious brothers. Memory, his 2 older brothers watch from the side, cold, calculated expressions on their faces. He concludes he must completely stop standing out, otherwise the brothers will definitely kill him. Arriving at the market, he decides to behave like an ordinary child playing and fooling around. He admits he has worked all his life and has no idea what normal people do for pleasure. His attention is caught by a huge, luxurious building towering over the entire street. Excited, he compares the huge store to Corso and greedily rushes towards it. His joy is cut short by a man pulling a dirty child by a rope. A close-up shows the miserable, doomed expression on the child's face, the body covered in dirt. The brutal man shouts to the gathered crowd, saying this is not a circus act. One of Van's guards twitches and reflexively reaches for his sword, instinctively reacting to the terrible sight. Angrily, the man proclaims the boy's son the one he intends to sell into slavery. Van shockingly learns that slavery exists and the man's cruel mindset crumbles to dust. His maid explains that slavery is allowed to pay off debts or as punishment for crimes. The impoverished boy watches as his father explains the debt transfer system. Van is disgusted when he realizes slavery here is not an accident but a deeply rooted and fully accepted part of this society. A charming woman appears and immediately recognizes Van, the son of Marcus. He realizes with surprise. She moves him to the core of his soul. The woman points to his formal attire. She recognizes the family crest on his cloak and immediately understands. Before her is a young genius. She meets him in the merry chamber of commerce, boasting that they have everything. The woman introduces herself Rosalie and gives a pleasant and ceremonial greeting. The man trying to sell his son noticeably trembles due to Van's noble status. He shivers, nervously sweats, as the reality of what happened sinks in. Van ignores the pleasantries and asks Rosalie about the potential price of the boy. Rosalie looks the boy over, estimates his age, and asks how much he costs. Just learning that the boy has thieving magic, she declares, he costs only 3 large silver. The father fiercely objects, insisting that other slaves sell for at least 5. Rosalie coolly explains that 3 silver coins is a fair price for a small, unskilled boy. Driven into rage by this assessment, the father shouts that his son is absolutely worthless. He raises his hand or strikes the child, shouting that he is worth almost nothing. Someone barked for him to stop, reproaching the man for cruelty to his own child. The father and Rosalie argued neither of them was obliged to complete the deal. When the father abruptly snatches the boy from his hands, Van makes a clear, firm, final statement. Van steps forward, he extends 5 large silver coins and looks into the eyes of the frightened father. He holds the man's gaze, confidently waiting for a response. Van pauses to compose himself, fearing that his emotions might endanger the boy. He caused a panic as soon as he realized they only have gold coins and the silver needed is not there. Rosalie easily intervenes and offers to take the changes upon herself and settle this agreement. The father snatches the coins and walks away without even turning around. The little quiet child remains sitting on the ground alone. The rope is still tied. Van squats down and generally asks if the boy is not injured and if he can stand up. He tells the boy named Kamzin that now he is free. Van thinks about how to explain this, realizing that he cannot just leave the boy. He asks if Kamzin has anywhere to go and offers him a job at his home. The Marquis' guard explains he will not take anyone for work without checking their past unless they are a slave. Van apologizes and asks Kamzin if he agrees to go with him under these conditions. He advises first to get new clothes and wants them to celebrate their new partnership agreement. Rosalie interrupts them and says that first they need to conclude a proper slave contract. Van politely asks, "Press my hands to ease the magical process." A bright flash glows and a contract is magically forged between 2 boys. Burning lines of light form a complex mark on the back of the Kamsan's hand. Rosalie explains this is the mark of a slave contract created by her contract magic. She waves money and says goodbye, and Van thanks her but feels guilty inside. Rosalie is embarrassed, a noble has never thanked her before. Freezing in place, she offers to show them the clothing shop. Van takes Thompson by the hand and shows they will start by choosing his clothes. As they walk, Sidon firmly and sincerely squeezes Vogan's palm. In a well-stocked clothing store, they select a certain section of items. The young lord points his companion to a rack with exquisite highest quality clothing. Then the shopkeeper offers a more typical lower-grade clothing worn by slaves. Van firmly refuses, insisting that higher quality clothes be taken for his new friend. Kumsin silently stands in his tattered rags, his face sad and distant. The shopkeeper thanks his lord, recalling the unexpected and generous purchase. Van internally replays the decision he just made sudden and too important. Kumsin, already in new clothes, thinks that this will be best. The boy in glasses crouched and peeked through the creaky gate, calling Lord Vaughn. He reports to his young lord that Deputy Commander D is currently searching for him. Van Hansenma gives him the instruction to say that he has already left. The messenger is completely confused by his master's strange request. Kumsin explains his unwillingness to wear gloves. He fears others' reaction to his mark. Van insists proof of their connection is at the slave market and this must be shown. Then he admits that he has already bought a pair of gloves for him. When Kam sees that he agrees to wear them, the messenger abruptly bursts inside and exhales sharply from shock. The boy reports the disappearance of Van, so it turns out the witness must have seen hallucinations. Deputy Commander D angrily meets with Kumsan and, looking closely at the crumbs on his lips, begins the interrogation. Kumsan discreetly tries to wipe away traces of a fresh snack. He denies everything, but the commander insists he personally saw him eating it. Ruthlessly, berates punishes Kumsan for ignoring the order of the chivalric order. The commander growls at the incredulity that the young slave dares to answer him back. A thought strikes him, he will. Train comes in Lord Vaughn's stead. On the other side of the door, Vaughn tries to suppress laughter as Kumsan gets into trouble. Van reflects on his Baland, slowly losing the status of protege and becoming ordinary. A top-down view of the estate marks the passage of time. Now Van is already 8 years old. Grand Golden's estate is the backdrop for a defining event. The staff excitedly discuss the upcoming magical ability test for the young genius. They express confidence that he will have powerful elemental magic like his family. In the huge hall, a voice throws a question: how could such shocking results of his magical experiment have come about? The question is asked directly: is he really deprived of any elemental ability? The young nobleman reacted to the unexpected result with a contemptuous smile. He quickly feigned surprise when Van's father flew into shock and disbelief that he was overcome by the wave. Van, nervously sweating, recalls his ability is production magic or alchemy. Magic is explained as a power that creates imaginary objects from materials. However, this is considered ineffective because others can achieve similar results without magic. The harsh reality magic that seems useless falls on the boy's face. Inside, Van celebrates that he has finally revealed his 2-year plan to ruin his own reputation. On a dark background, details of the magic truly desired by the nobles, elemental and healing. His older brother, Mercia, earned the status of heir through incredible hard work. The other two brothers, both fire mages, constantly mock Mercia for his element. With fierce bluntness, Bello's father dismissed his prodigy fame, rejecting it once and for all. He worries how he and his late wife could have produced such a child. Van recalls his mother's death caused by the power of his mana, which he manifested during birth. His father clenches a pendant, calling himself a fool for lost hope. Drop by drop, sweat traces a path across Van's taut and tense temples and anxious face. The situation escalates when his father snatches a sword with a sharp clang. He swears he will not let his home become a laughingstock, filling Van with horror. His father asks what to do with this terrible source of shame. Determined, a slightly older Van stands next to an image of his younger self. Mercier approaches his father and offers a solution to involve a specific village. He proposes to send his younger brother, Van, to this remote location. He describes a nameless village spread out in a mountain range rich in resources. The map shows its strategic position between two hostile territories. The father understands how brilliant the plan is to establish control over the arrival. The presence of Van provides the perfect excuse to stay nights in this area. A family member stationed there creates a legitimate reason for a military presence. The Marquis's gate catches the cunning of the plan and gives us approval. Then he officially entrusts his young son Van to manage the village. As they depart, the father cynically remarks on what a clever calculation it is in Mercia. Later, Mercia kneels before the younger brother and sincerely apologizes. He could not watch Van suffer just as he could not stand his magic. Van refuses to blame him and insists that his brother actually saved him. He runs through in his mind the terrible alternatives he could have endured without this exile. Although the situation looks hopeless, he perceives it as a new chance. Clenching the app, he swears not to waste the chance his brother gave him. Mercia looks at his younger brother with a gaze full of admiration. He calls Van a genius and, impressed by his maturity and positive attitude, cannot get enough of him. He praises Van's wisdom, admitting, "The guy is many times more observant than he is." He reveals that others in the house have long been singing Van's praises. Mercia feels deep down, in the future the abilities of the Vanes will be needed. He honestly acknowledges his limitations in the face of this future. He extends a small talisman and swears to do everything he can to help. Panoramas of the two brothers' class close their bond with gratitude and respect. He passionately declared that Lord Vogan is a smart and magnificent nobleman. She is outraged by his exile, while someone else reminds her about the prohibition of expressions. Van thanks her for the care but says he is glad to set off. The maid completely freezes from his unexpectedly cheerful attitude. He suddenly realizes his exile is not chains but a ticket to freedom. He imagines a carefree life with plenty of free time like a country squire. His idealistic plan crumbles from just one look at his chaotic retinue. With the feeling as if the ground has sunk beneath his feet, he understands his life will be very eventful. The cynical man thinks that nobility always places profit above people. He believes that for them, the safety of civilians is just a belated thought. An adventurer named Ortho reviews the request to guard the nobleman's child. Her companion shows obvious contempt for the nobility, who look down on commoners. Ortho explains they accepted the task only to stay in the Marquis's territory. Van der Reeves disarmed them with a sparkling smile and a polite greeting. He enhances the power of Orthos, and even the experienced traveler is baffled. Van compares the adventure to a cool hero from historical books. He marvels at the man's huge weapon and asks if it is not too heavy. The companion explains the incredible weight of the weapon is the source of its power. A group of cynical adventurers has completely submitted to his true nature. Ortho remains thoughtful. She is surprised and impressed by the unexpected character of the young lord. Van Waves excitedly exclaims that he is eager to start the journey with them. The travelers find him pleasant and decide to treat him with respect. Preparations officially begin for their long road to the village. Van outlines the travel plans, including carriages, and discusses 12 adventure regards. He is filled with relief and thanks his brother for the spacious conditions for the journey. With a passionate cry, Till announces she has agreed to become Van's personal maid. She is boiling over the gag order, while Simplified Van watches her intently with concern. A muscular man named D declares that he is joining them to teach Van swordsmanship. Another knight questions the order as two others cheerfully encourage the unpredictable arrival of D. The old butler, Esparta, informs Vaughn that he has told Lord Yalpo about his early dismissal. Standing next to the fully loaded wagon, Esparta explains that Marcos gave his full consent. Van wonders to himself whether his father would so easily give up such a devoted butler. His gaze sharpens as he stares intently and suspiciously at the old man. Esparta cast back a fleeting, understanding look as he walked toward the carriage. The elegant carriage is already standing by, waiting for the new expanded group of passengers. Leaning forward with a sly smile, he showed a spark in his eyes indicating he was going to watch the van loads. Van met a mask of despair, clenched his fist, and begged him not to do it. Out loud, Gadki asks whether they all conspired to watch him and simply to harass him. Striving to save face, Van Tel said that the story about strong allies at least reassures. Till approaches, beaming with a smile, and asks if something good happened. He is surprised when she notices that he is smiling. Van admits that he is happy because she and the rest will come with him. His two companions have already seen him sneaking up, so they listen to his frank confession. Till proudly explains that she defended her position as a personal maid to Lord Mercia. Vankomi seems to wonder whether a tournament was held to determine who could accompany him. She explains that he is not like his brothers, they ignore the staff. She recalls how he greets the maids kindly every day. He is also remembered for giving them candies and even helping to clean. Two other maids gently agree. The servants who train with him in fencing also love him. A barely noticeable blush appears on his cheeks when he learns about his popularity. Blushing with shame, he extends the opportunity to stay at the estate. Approach and firmly refuse him immediately, stating that he will serve Van all his life. Embarrassed by such intensity, Van jokingly asks if this is a proposal of hand and heart. Kumsan looks at him with sincere eyes, confesses love, and even gives him worship. A powerful oath of loyalty knocks Van off his feet. He is completely stunned. When the carriage sets off, the observer notes that Kumsan has grown. The turning of the carriage wheel announces the true beginning of their journey. Van notices the loosened fastening of the family crest above the wagon, a sign of his secret departure. As they pass through the gate, he involuntarily recalls his father's wish to erase him. A young girl, the guard's daughter, recognizes Van on the street. She asked where he was going in a surprised wagon, as if someone had given her information. Suddenly, horsemen appear with flags in their hands, and they organize a humiliating parade. One night, he explains the order to Grand Sandoff, ignoring the wishes of the marquises. He joyfully guesses that D had no idea about the secret order at all. The man announces the departure of Vans to the entire settlement, causing a commotion. He begs the gathered crowd to give the young lord the grandest farewell. The townspeople call Van, asking him to return soon. Waving from the carriage, Van promises the emotional crowd that he will not disappear for long. Safely inside, he admits that he broke down and cried despite all his best efforts. He takes a handkerchief while it is still being made, and moreover, it cries beside him. A hand extends to the young lord a skewer with freshly roasted meat. Having passed 2 cities, the squad sets up the first camp. Van recalls experience from a past life, how he slept and how he moved in writing machines. He notes that this is his first camping trip in a dangerous world where magical beasts roam. The adventure group was led by veteran guard Orto's sheet. Ortho extends a skewer to Van and he accepts it with a joyful, "Yay." Van thanks him, impressed by how professionally and elaborately he speaks. Ortho professionally reports to Van der rest immediately after his perimeter check. Later that night, Ortho descended the stairs to Van and asked if something was wrong with him. Van brushes off his anxiety, and Ortho promises to submit another report later. Till enters with a tray, laughing as it would happen in Van Asser. She proudly boasts that she can appreciate his glory better than any adventure. 2 covered wagon lines make their way through endless snowy mountain ridges. A flash of memories shows the company breaking camp after leaving the second city on their route. They arrive at a small settlement, the 4th on the way to the rest stop. Van counts the colossal distance they have covered in the last 2 weeks. He marvels at the colossal expanse of territory near the marquee. In the carriage, Till informs Van that they will soon arrive at the village. Van mentally prepares for their arrival, comparing it to a corporate relocation. The teasingly creaky carriage suddenly jerks sharply and breaks into a bloody, rattling stop. Having climbed to the horizon, they see smoke rising from the fortified village ahead. The frightened voice of the driver confirms the village is under attack. The entire detachment gathers in the ravine to assess the hopeless situation. The man guesses who the attackers are: bandits, mercenaries who are fleeing. Orta warns Van, retreat from her before it is too late, but Van says he is used to fighting. They notice armored troops and mages, lined up in ranks before the village gate. Van notices that the villagers are trapped inside, like turtles in a shell. The knight passionately whispers they need to join the fight and work together. Van urges caution and doubts the wisdom of fighting an unknown enemy. One of his companions supports him and says that it is too dangerous. Ordo explains his rule: he never agrees to a request that sacrifices his party members. Kolodno states coldly, if he risked everyone's life, they would have been dead long ago. Proclaims his oath service to protect the new lands of his lord. Ordo acknowledges the honor of D, but says it has nothing to do with his group. He offers to escort Van to safety, depending on how the situation unfolds. With a firm hand, Ortho refuses to fight, calling D's path self-sacrifice. The group discusses the odds while he marks the forces and prepares to face 30 enemies who were before him earlier. Sparta offers to fight as a mage, but Orda is unconvinced and refuses. Sparta coolly suggests that they can observe the enemy's combat power from a safe distance. He outlines the strategy: to build a barrier and launch a sudden flank attack. Van quickly realizes their only goal is to distract, attack, and then break away in flight. The strategist confirms Van must become the bait, otherwise the knights will surely perish. Van rejects the plan, stating that Sparta will definitely be killed. The young lord turns away, and his face hardens. A new determination appears in it. He looks at his loyal followers, preparing to make a fateful decision. A sharp collective cry silently bursts from the mouths of his comrades. She tearfully pulled the gate. Better that she herself goes to meet the enemies. When the scene moved forward, he resolutely declared that he would come with them too. Van cuts them off mid-word, reminding them what the ultimate goal of the plan is. He waves his hand, trying to calm their emotional protests and regain control. With a firm gaze, he asserts his authority, implying that he is the one in charge here. He explains to Ordi that his contract does not include a clause about fighting to save the village. He tells Usbada his past service for the family means he cannot die here. He reminds D the knights serve his father, not him personally. He listens to the crying until he sees in it a sister he cannot bear to lose. With a serious face, the Komsomol von Tell says he does not need to die for him. He adds that he is glad Kempson is enjoying his new life. Both Kompson and Till burst into tears from the deep kindness of their lord. Van's face hardens as he offers his solemn apology to his followers. He apologizes to everyone for the difficult decision he is about to make. Clenching his sword, the young lord begins to lay out his battle plan. He outlines his strategy for a frontal assault and flanking pincer attacks. Van says that if he is killed, they must leave his body. He assures them Duchy will not worry if his identity is kept secret. Hearing this, Orton lets out a long, exasperated sigh and finally gives up. He grabs Ven by the collar and declares that they will risk their lives for him. The adventurer warns, a warning: if you say more once again, everyone will face reprimand. The cynical woman admits she has only seen masters who just chatter all her life. This, she declares, is exactly why her group is now ready to risk their lives. Behind her stand other travelers, also holding the same determined resolve. The knights also swore allegiance to protect Lord Vogan in his future. A flash of memories shows Van's Sparta warning to recall his noble duties and responsibilities. Covering his illness, he promised that the exile would end in 3 days. In memories, the younger Van complains to Spartu about the long wait. In the present, Asarta takes command and announces his distance for the attack plan. He orders D and his knights to attack from the left flank. Sparta orders Orthe and his comrades to strike from the right flank. The remaining forces were ordered to wait and hold reserve in case of any emergencies. With a single shout from Roger, the entire company bursts into action. They rush forward with grim determination, ready to execute the plan. Suddenly, huge fragments of the earth's crust erupt from the ground right before them. From afar, the knights marvel at the completed wall, paying tribute to the mage butler. They thought Sparta would have sacrificed himself for the younger lord. Ortha realizes that his notion of nobility has been completely overturned. The cynical traveler is now interested in Van and solemnly promises to help him. She risks her life for a strategy created to protect everyone involved in the matter. Ortho finds the strange boy Vanna for being willing to die for others. Van stands alone on the newly built wall and looks gloomily outside. His hand rests on the stone, feeling the weight of his decision. Till and Kamzin rushed to him and hugged tightly, squeezing in close embraces. Till sighed with relief and choked with tears, repeating her thanks again and again that Vansama is safe. Look, he takes oaths to become Van's shield and will follow him to death. Van quietly lowers his gaze, with a sadness that reveals understanding. He feels how heavy these feelings are. He feels that they are like his own family to him. He reminds them that this is a battle, and they must do everything they can. The others confirm they will help if it becomes dangerous, wiping their tears while Kumsan gathers strength for the clash. They give the final Roger before the massive earth and wall. For now, the confident battle cries of the bandits thunder outside, echoing near the village. A new chapter begins. The bandits haven't even thought everything through to the end. They decided that a small settlement would be poorly governed and that it would be an easy target. The bandits laugh about the feasts they will hold after their quick victory. Suddenly, an arrow with a dull thud hits the back of one of the attackers. Panic covers them as soon as they realize they are being attacked from behind. They freeze in shock before the huge wall that suddenly appeared. Their confusion turns into horror as they are surrounded from all sides. The bandits realize that they have been caught in a pincer movement. Otoko notices that the knight named D holds his heavy saber without any effort. A majestic figure appears, the deputy commander of the Order Fertile Shabarak. The bandits fall into trembling horror as soon as they see the famous knight. They shout to each other to run because they understand, if they engage in battle, they will die. Otoko chops down a fleeing bandit and shouts that their people are becoming fewer. He notices a lone bandit who dashes desperately along the wall. Other travelers pick up the chase, shouting to stop the one who is running away. Otoko realizes the wall creates a dangerous blind spot for their archers. He shouts a warning to his comrade right into the path where the bandits are going. The woman in glasses sees the axe in the bandit's hand rushing straight at her. She panics. She sees that her spell is on cooldown and has nothing to defend herself with. When the axe comes down, she believes she is about to be killed. In the blur of movements, Van and comes in, rushed headlong to intercept the attack. Van mocks the bandit, calling him a heavyweight wrestling giant to attract his attention. The woman in glasses thinks he is reckless, going one-on-one against a formidable enemy. Van's sword flashes a strike on the bandit, who breaks away and gasps backward. Another bandit lunges at the woman, but Van rushes forward to intercept the blow. Defending her, he orders his forces to focus their attacks forward. The woman stares frozen, not understanding who this incredibly incredible and authoritative boy is. After the fight, the bandits will be tied up and broken without any injuries. The woman is curious about something while they discuss how to collect their reward. Or it hints that they will stay even if there is no money in it. He says that his party has business with Euro, but we will return. His associates agree. They say they will hunt magical beasts in the forest for profit. The woman notes that Van is not a typical nobleman and not an ordinary boy. The author agrees it is precisely because of his courage and wit that Van wants to stay. He notes Van's noble elegance crumbles the moment he opens his mouth. Van is polite and treats commoners as equals, not as inferior beings. For the first time, Otoko feels that he sees a nobleman with true determination. All his companions agree with the young lord's assessment. They assume that he was then ready to die for them. He is praised for his knight swordsmanship and mature tactical moves. They wondered what territory he would build when he grew up. Otoko asks his companions how they feel about staying and helping. He states that Van is the most pleasant nobleman he has ever known. His four companions silently and unanimously exchange glances. Everywhere even emotionally overwhelmed for Van, she still dared to risk her life first. Van agrees just so she would stop crying while Kamzin watches. Seeing Klemchka being hit with a fist, he realized he needed to become stronger. The adventure woman looks inside, sharply frightening even the quietly sobbing till to tears. She teases Van for making women cry at such a young age. Van smiles, says he always tries to be sincere with women. He emphasizes that he is especially sincere with the women he cherishes. The woman asks if he is an elf, noting his mature behavior. Van denies this and explains his upbringing and indifference to informalities. She asked if he adopted the way of thinking from his butler. The woman kneels and says that he saved her. His actions did that. With a radiant smile, Van tells her it's all right and to let it go. In her inner thoughts, she acknowledges the undeniable reality of what is happening. Her thoughts confirm, young Lord Van has already completely won her devotion. Arriving at the destination, Vans cheerfully announced their arrival, although they were already late. With a bright, determined smile, Van declares that their first meeting will be historic. A cautious crowd of villagers, men, women, and children gathered and stands in place, waiting for them. The men from the village, armed with simple spears, froze and look with gloomy, distrustful expressions. While his polished boots stand firmly on the ground, he solemnly introduces himself, Vin Ferdio. Placing his hand on his heart, he explains that he was sent by the new ruler to govern them. An elderly man named Rhonda steps forward and introduces himself. He is the village elder who will thank for everything. Van addresses the elder, acknowledging rumors that the local landlords and soldiers have been left without a leader. He firmly declares his intention to take command and protect the entire village. With a deep, informal bow, he humbly asks them for understanding and help. The elderly man, moved by his kindness, invites them inside and shows that once there were 150 people in the village. His overly ceremonial apologies are perceived as excessive by one of his own companions. In response to Van's sincere kindness, the elder leads them to his simple wooden house. He regretfully explains that the population in the village used to be much larger than it is now. Inside, he reveals, recent sharpened attacks have reduced their numbers, now only 100 remain. The elders noted how their vulnerability increased because the nearby border patrols left their post. Van's distinguished companion, Esparta, listens to the grim report with a keen, tense gaze. The elder concludes that under the rule of the new lords, the village is now under constant threat. He explains the political complexity. The former ruler still has many supporters in the region. The elder grimly insists that their small, poor village is not considered worth defending. Having gathered strength again, Van promises to keep the elder informed of all future plans. The muscular man snorts defiantly at the course of events and says there is no point in complaining. He brazenly attacks Van, demanding, "Is this really his message for the nobility?" With a tense face, the man introduces himself. He is the son of Ragda Malaga. Panel with watermark. Calmly but persistently, he asked the man to sit and declared his own authority over the village. An impassioned man demonstrates his contempt for merely complaining about their difficult situation. His malicious outburst tears the meeting apart. He directly lunges at the young lord and confronts him. Clenching his fists, the son of Ragna Malaga asserts himself with a threatening look. Unfazed by the man's outburst, Van calmly tells him to sit and speaks on behalf of the village. He believes the problem may be a fundamental flaw in the kingdom's laws. The village leaders sit in a circle and attentively listen to their new young lord. He pauses for a moment, delves into thought while choosing his next words. He asked them what they were truly afraid of and declared that he would rule this village. Pressing his palm to his chest, the young lord speaks with unwavering conviction. He asserts that mere complaints about the kingdom's laws will not change their fate. A woman raises her hand, signaling to him that there are still people in the village. Confidently states that they have already considered 3 specific measures to save themselves. Their first plan was to create something so valuable that the kingdom could not ignore them. Their second idea was to earn enough money to hire mercenaries for regular protection. Their third and final goal is to rebuild and develop the village on their own. She, however, admits that they have failed to implement any of these plans. Van understands their logistical problems prevent them from making real profit. The villagers could not earn money, so they lacked funds for reconstruction. Despite their past troubles, the villagers still arrived, desperately seeking a solution. Van acknowledges his difficulties, but vows to use his education and skills to help them. The village leaders sit in gloomy silence and listen to the speeches of the young lord. Forward steps a majestic man named Espada, who, introducing himself as the master's butler, states his name. The deputy knight leader D also steps forward and swears loyal service to Van. The peasants fall silent. The appearance of such important men seems to them a dream. Zoronda, full of admiration, asked if they really intended to help the village. Van immediately sets expectations. He says directly that he does not have elemental combat magic. The peasants collapse to the ground in a funny wave of complete despair. He examines their simple wooden fence and notes how dangerously vulnerable it is to fire. His butler Espada confirms that the magic and the connected stone will remain strong for some time. He confidently states that he will quickly build a strong stone wall. At night, D enthusiastically suggests, let his people dig a defensive ditch. Van continues strategic planning, demands traps, and prepares weapons for ranged combat. He proposes using ordinary stones as projectiles so that untrained peasants can hold and throw them. Addressing the crowd, he humbly promises to do everything possible for the village's development. He gathers them, swearing that they will fight back and build a prosperous village together. In a wave of self-reflection, he is somewhat taken by awkwardness. He sounds like a politician. A peasant talks about his current misfortune, describing how he is pressed by an excessive tax of 30. Van decisively lowers the tax to 10, even offering to take the deficit upon himself. The peasants are stunned by his generosity for him. This is critically important for their stability. He contemplates the harsh reality. Some peasants sell their children to pay off debts. A worried woman asks if they can turn to the knighthood for protection from robbers. Van explains such a great distance makes a call for help futile and a long process. He lays out the harsh truth before everyone, a limited budget and a lack of people for defense. Van turns to his butler Espada and voices a clear, seemingly impossible magical request. With a burst of incredible power, a colossal stone wall erupts from the ground. Looking at the majestic new wall, Van tells his people that now he needs their help. He promises, together with their strength, the village will stand firm and become even stronger. Because there is no housing, the Vina group is forced to rest in their wagon near the campfire. The good peasant Rhonda offered his house, but they could not accept his charity. In the dark sky near the snowy mountains, the campfire crackles cheerfully with sparks. Watermark panel. Van notes that he has never once complained about his gift of production magic. He admits, now just having seen the peasant's doubt, he has never felt such a bitter taste. He knows that people believed, without elemental magic nothing can be achieved. He did everything to earn the peasants' trust, but they still do not deeply believe him. He decides to use his unique magic to protect and improve the village for everyone. The man points to the vulnerability of their wall and says that they need to go on the offensive. Van finds an unexpected and creative solution to his defensive problem: catapults. The senior Espada rejects this idea and says that catapults are for sieges, not for defense. The village elder became interested in the idea and asked to explain how they work. The satellite explains its function and throws large stones to destroy stationary targets. The Van counters hint that they charge smaller stones for a wider and more effective hit zone. With an excited speech, the man suggests adding oil to the payload in the burner to make the result fiery. Espada looks intently at Vogan and demands to say where he got such advanced tactics. With a bright and proud smile, Van joyfully declares that the brilliant idea belongs to him. After his incredible statement, a deep, stunning silence suddenly hangs over the whole group. The scene transitions with a blur, and the narrative sharply jumps into a memory. He could not comprehend his own ability and continuously practiced it during the journey. He clenches his fist, stubbornly deciding to finally reveal his abilities, the true, hidden power. In the memory, the Ortho's party of adventurers reports how they drove the local bandits away. Ortho informs Van that his group will stay in this area to hunt for profit. In a close-up, the man barely flinches, listening to the conversation. In the dense forest, the traveler Ortho declares the place suitable precisely for his purposes. Tilly praises Ortho's sharp mind for how she unfailingly senses monsters during their long journey. She warns Lord Vaughn that danger lies ahead and suggests gathering firewood here. Soon he reflects on what a futile waste this is for such a wonderful traveler. Ven's eyes flash as he excitedly points to a peculiar tree. A closer look shows the wood he chose has thick ancient bark. Kime stood near the sin points and pointed to another tree, but Till rejected it, saying it was too large. With a dull, solid thud, Van firmly presses his palm against the tree trunk. He begins to imagine an exquisite piece of furniture, incredibly precise details down to the smallest. Closing his eyes, he focuses his thoughts on every tiny specific detail he can imagine. His thoughts dive deeper, he imagines every fiber that makes up the tree. A new idea ripens in his head, and he is confident that he can do it. He imagines separating the fibers into finer threads and weaving them together. A successful burst of magical energy flashes from his palms sharply, in an instant. Till calls it incredible when he presents the newly assembled block made of wood fiber. He decides, for now, to load these strange new blocks into the cart. Either those dinner guests returned confused by the cubes instead of the expected firewood. Ortho does not hide his surprise. The sensation of the unusual material he holds is impressive. Finding that it is both lighter and harder than expected, he asks to test it. He marvels at himself at how strong the wooden material can be. With a persistent rasp, Ordo chops down with the sword with all his might. The blade descends with incredible force directly onto the strange wooden block. The block is undamaged, and the stone beneath it crumbles into pieces. Juan simply says, Ordo completely failed to cut through the block. His companions are amazed. Biting into the ice, the blades tear at the break as they watch how incredibly durable these materials are. Orko turns white from shock. The blow was so strong it even split solid stone. He cannot believe it, and Juan innocently asks which is more durable. Orcho laughs loudly, calling it a victory because they obtained strong materials. Juan looked at the block and said it was a pleasant surprise. Nearby, the wheel of a cart rumbled and someone shouted, Lord Juan. Only a brief flash of movement, and it is clear that the scene changes extremely quickly. Juan sits in a cluttered cart, and around him are his numerous exquisite creations. His companion asks how much mana he spends, noting that production magic is incredibly expensive. He decides to test his monopoly by creating a sword in Japanese style. Watch how her gaze suddenly widens with complete admiration as soon as she sees the shining blade. Van presents his stunned comrade with a magnificent newly forged sword. Trembling with uncontrollable joy, Kamsan accepts the gift, blushing profusely. He fervently declares that the sword will become his most precious family heirloom. Next, Van hands his maid till the formidable Skullador in battle axe. She stumbles and babbles her things, causing him to ask if she doesn't like axes. He panics, deciding that he misjudged her taste because of this sturdy, intimidating design. While Nuzzles grabbed the weapon, she passionately declared that she was simply overwhelmed by it. He sincerely rejoices that she likes giving so much. He felt a little unwell and decided, later he would make her a cute decorative toy. He notes with surprise that his crafting magic is actually quite useful. The sudden usefulness of his magic dawns on him and he exhales contentedly. Holding a small knife in his hands, he realizes his abilities are much greater than he imagined. A new chapter begins about an ambitious house construction project. Praises pour onto the huge, newly erected stone wall, an incredible object to behold. And look, our wonders are already taking shape in just half a day. Otoko calls Vina an anomaly, someone acting beyond any sense. Van is glad he was placed on the same level as the excellent family butler of Sparta. The woman in glasses notes, a mage of such a level is truly rare. Van was glad that his Spartan himself suggested retiring together with him. The woman sincerely tells the old man that she wants him to have a good time. A memory surfaces, Spartak reveals his greatest joy in life. Sparta proclaims, the greatest joy is seeing young Lord Van grow up. He pulls the protest wagon away on a crash course with his duties. Discoffs asks how they will strengthen the defense just by piling up stones. Pouting, Van is forced to show what his production magic is capable of and what it can lead to. Inside, Dee expresses doubts about using production magic for this task. Another man agrees and says, Lord Vogan is amazing, but his magic. It will be of no use for this particular fortification project. Van believes he can heal wooden gates just like blocks. His only truly important concern is the final weight of the new structure. He knows for vital protection, enormous weight is crucial. With a loud rumble, the huge carved gates instantly thud into place. Van wanted to test his strength, he struck it with a sword. Ortho agrees and prepares to strike the new gates with full force. He unleashes a powerful two-handed blow on the door directly on their hard surface. The strike produces a dull, tearing clang that echoes throughout the space. Ordos breaks and recoils back from the gate, his hands pulse from the recoil. He inspects the place of impact and reports, only a small dent remains. The crowd erupts in shock, not believing how a tree can be so incredibly hard. Van smiles, confident that this proves he is capable of protecting them all. Later, Van lies in a narrow bed inside the group's railway carriage. His body aches, he slept all night in a cramped space without proper sheets or bedding. Without running water, he constantly feels disgusting, although his clothes are clean. They continue to live simply from the carriage, even after arriving in the village. A thought suddenly illuminates him with clarity. He is a true nobleman. He remembers how Father Trapp said, he began to think like a traveler. The next morning he greets Till and comes in during their cleaning. He sees how fatigue weighs on everyone and understands, action must be taken soon. With newfound determination, he declares his intention to build a house for them. In the open field, he orders comes in to bring several wooden blocks. And the elder confirms that he can build his house in an open public space. The elder states that this is a good place for the new residents of the Leeds Lord. Van dreams of the future with harvest fairs and a great banquet for everyone. Feeling his boundless mana, he wonders if he can really erect the house. He plans a separate, stately house for Dai and other knights. The mental scheme in his head grows larger and larger as he sketches it out. He draws the beams between the pillars, the walls, and finally the roof. He understands that to please Sparta, different styles of rooms are needed. Without glass, he substitutes sliding panels and plans to procure silicate sand. In a moment, a grand estate Arai sand, he worries, it is too large. Sparta objects, it is too small, although the architecture is wonderful. Till and Compton praise his magic perfect for the ruling lord. Van slightly shook his head and doubt still sat deep within him. He believes that powerful offensive magic better protects people. The young maid fervently rejects the idea that a strong lord can guarantee safety. She states that she prefers to live in the town of Lord Vanos rather than with Mark in the company of Shampus. The senior butler explains, in peaceful times people need a lord who makes life better. The crowd shudders with excitement and vows to follow their young lord anywhere. A large crowd of peasants and travelers buzzes and shouts in amazement near the new estate. He joyfully explains that he built that luxurious house thanks to his production magic. After that, he offers to build houses for everyone if they bring him more wood. The man with a ponytail growls in decisive fury and gives orders, let them work. His subordinates respond sharply in a military manner. Yes, sir, they rush to execute. Van watches the frantic bustle and grumbles because his easy, relaxed life has disappeared. The men shout full of determination, swearing to outpace the knights in firewood gathering. He quietly wonders if all these people now intend to live in this village. A group of villagers approaches closer, and one man steps forward to speak. An elderly man tells a rumor. Supposedly, Van is building houses for the people. Van listens, forcing a smile at barely creaks, and he waits to see what will happen next. A flood of requests for reconstruction arrives. Rotten doors, ruined homes, everything needs restoration. He is overwhelmed. He is sure he should not have spoken so frankly with D. He surveys the dilapidated homes of the villagers, acknowledging their miserable condition. With a calm face, he agrees to fulfill their requests step by step. Van solemnly announces he will rebuild the homes of all from scratch. The villagers burst into applause and joy, cheerfully chanting Lord Van's name and expressing gratitude. Their hands are raised in a unified gesture of support and celebration. The village restoration project starts with teams taking on different tasks. Till and Kumsan are assigned to watch over Vogan as he begins his work. Inside the building, Van releases his magic to start constructing houses. He finds his rhythm and magically transforms old materials into new building bricks. A continuous stream of requests repeatedly pushes him back to the dull old office job that drove him into depression. D-Watchers watch excitedly, praising Van's huge mana reserves and increasing their knowledge. The newly built houses impress, and that is why they evoke admiration. Van drafts his master plan for the village, a neat checkerboard pattern, as if by ruler. Later, he explains the intention to rebuild each house according to personal needs. Now the grateful peasants bow every time and give him the harvest as soon as he passes by. The next project is revealed, and impatience is felt in the air. He announces the construction of a simple bathhouse next to his own residence. Till and Kumsin are ecstatic upon seeing the new bathhouse. Van admits that he built it for himself but is glad they like it. A girl named Plurio uses water magic to fill the fire-heated bath. Cum calls Vaughn to join the bathing near the end, and it throws him off balance, also causing him embarrassment. He screams from shame, as if in his soul he is already over 30. Till and Kumsin relax in the steam bath, laughing at his reaction. Later enters his spacious, empty bedroom, and suddenly realizes his mistake. He quickly returns to work and decides to make beds for everyone. A bed frame appears, and he plans to use straw to make futons. Exhausted, he falls onto the new bed and freezes, struck by how soft and fluffy it is. He drifts into sleep, wishing everyone good night. The next morning begins with a close-up of a delicious, appetizing dish. Van bites into the breakfast, and beams the taste catches him with its light. Till is glad that she likes it and admits that she was worried about their ingredients. He recalls simple happiness, waking up and eating a tasty breakfast. He feels warm at heart, especially when sharing this moment with dear Till. His happy mood breaks when he considers their need for a regular income. Esparta confirms her fears. Merchants almost never visit this remote village. The weight of this new economic reality crashes down on Van, covering him with hopeless sorrow. Van interrupted his Spartan serious lecture to point out that the shopkeeper should have a mustache. Exhausted, he suggests postponing bigger and more complex questions. He suggests they first focus on strengthening the village's defense. Sparta reminds him that they don't even have basic seasonings and spacious suites. The textured background panel moves to the next phase of planning. Van acknowledges that they need to establish some form of industry. He demands immediate advice on what exactly the village can sell. 2 ideas are proposed and immediately shot down because they don't scale. Sparta weighs agricultural matters but concludes that it won't provide regular income. During the brainstorming, everything reaches a dead end and the group falls silent. Spartus, irritated, mutter that there should be an asterisk, something they can do. The view of the treetops shifts the scene to the open air. An unseen voice reflects on how much people love their Lord Van. A strong scout named Kuzala explains that the peasants are protecting their new weapon. Van says that they need to understand the effectiveness of their weapon so they can protect it. Wait a moment longer and they nervously look around, clutching their own formidable weapons convulsively. Kuzala confidently states that he has a solution for a demonstration. He shows a formidable Orc Knight shield, boasting about its strength. Kumsin hesitates, but she is urged to strike the shield with full force. He lowers the sword, and on the strike, a dull clank sounds. Kuzala laughs, understanding the reluctance, but still insists on a full-strength test. Kamsin and Von Staren stand frozen in confusion with wide-open eyes, looking at the result. Till is equally stunned by the unexpected result. Kuzala freezes in shock, mouth agape, as he looks at the broken shield. He bursts into screams and wild disbelief. He regrets that the shield was brand new. Close-up on a clean cut shows the strength of the wooden blade. Van calmly steps forward, assuring everyone that he will easily fix the shield. A flash of magical energy embraces the two halves, and they become whole again. A traveler has arrived, or the arrow has already hit. He turned around and asks what all the noise is about. Otoko suggests selling ore. His group has just turned back. He explains that they came across rare ore in the forest, teeming with monsters, without going deep inside. He unloads the ore, and under the trophy light outside emerge piles of iron, copper, and silver ore. He proudly raises a large shimmering crystalline rock to show it for inspection. Van's eyes flash with excitement. He immediately recognizes it as mithril ore. He is thrilled, impressed that such a valuable resource was found in the forest. Otoko carefully considers why ore remained undiscovered for so long. Van concludes, knights without an eye for ore are those who only look for worthless stuff and no one else. He concludes, a whole reserve of resources is buried at the foot of the mountains. Van decides to start with experiments with iron ore. He explains his unique purification process, creating a small cube of pure iron. Kyuzela's eyes sparkled as he impatiently asked Van to make him a sword. Otoko and his companion are amazed when Kyuzela becomes so obsessed with swords. Van generously agrees and promises to provide a weapon as thanks for the ore. He starts the forging process, focusing on making the edges impossibly sharp. A bright flash of light reveals a huge and exquisitely decorated longsword. He reflects on how quickly he mastered the intricate process of weapon making. In honor of his first client, Van gifts an ornate longsword. The warrior is completely stunned by the powerful, intimidating figure of the sword. Van playfully refuses the request to touch the precious sword, promising that there will be another very soon. Satisfied with his work, he presents Kemsin with a freshly forged short sword. When she was already completely overwhelmed by pure, reckless happiness upon receiving this beautiful weapon. The crowd of adventurers rushes forward, impatiently demanding their own custom weapons. The woman in glasses suggests that the newly discovered ore might prove valuable. His advisor, Esparta, notes that finding metal ore in the forest is an extremely rare thing. This discovery contradicts the usual mountain locations where ore is typically found. Esparta remarks that iron dust is known, but finding the real thing is either extremely rare or not the case at all. He theorizes about exceptions golems, which are often found near dungeons. A detail on the leg of the golem reinforces this shocking possibility. The thought of a nearby dungeon clearly impresses one of the adventurers. The travelers confirm that they did not find remains of a golem, so it turns out they are ancient. They thoroughly survey the dungeon since the area is poorly mapped. Esparta returns to her young lord with a gloomy and focused face. Van acknowledges that the discovery of the dungeon will radically change their situation. Despite the risks, Van's persistent expression shows a hint of ambition. The narrative says the dungeon is an endless repository of resources and treasures. Guild members are obliged to report on the dungeon. This is how new bases appear. A small illustration emphasizes the important role of the Travelers Guild. For travelers, finding a new dungeon is a glorious and profitable achievement. A transitional panel marks a change in the conversation. Van worries that their small village will not be able to accommodate the sudden influx of people. Their advisor agrees, listing the lack of premises and food supplies. Otoko suggests they avoid searches because he fears attacks from fugitive outsiders looking for easy prey. One woman rejects the idea of a secret expedition as an imprudent risk. Among their followers, they assume that they can solve the capacity problem with Van's magic. Van explains his plan first to develop the village to prevent interference. The group agrees to focus on finding the dungeon and gathering resources. He feels gratitude for their loyalty and decides to repay this service. He understands that the dungeon is a vital asset for any nobleman. He knows any discovery he makes will be taken from him by his torn family. It manifests as a powerful, brilliant burst of magical energy. He creates wonders through tireless work but still remains focused on needs. He acknowledges his fatigue but vows to first complete the important task. He considers that skilled workers are lacking for production. He plans to accumulate weapons and armor for the village's self-defense. The massive outer defensive wall around the village is almost completed. He explains how, using his magic, he fuses stones into a substance similar to concrete. He stands on the newly built wall and guards his impressive work. A bright flash of magic shows a power capable of leveling the wall. He creates powerful blows in Billy style, reinforcing them with materials from magical beasts. To protect the operator, he attaches a large shield to each weapon. He builds watchtowers and places even more ballistae on the roofs. His maid goes to prepare food and sends for their comrade, Kamsin. He finds Kamsan and praises him for his diligent and persistent work. Noticing that the scene with Kamon is quiet, he gently asks what is on his mind. Showing his excitement, the scene reveals a power capable of transforming the village. He modestly downplays his role and asks Thompson about his own goals. Kamston hesitated, pondering this profound question before answering. With firm conviction, Kemson declares that his goal in life is to protect Van. Van was completely bewildered by the strength of his ward's statement. He tells the calm scene not to pressure him and then sincerely thanks him. He reflects on how openly and honestly Kamtan dedicates himself to him. The transition panel changes the scene and picks up the story further. Van and his followers review their work satisfied with its new strength. The completed watchtower stands as a mighty symbol of their progress. His supporters declare, the village is now a small, impregnable fort. A detail of the deep moat surrounding the fortress is shown. Dee thinks that Van's strength can bring him high status. Esparta sharply rejects this idea, referring to the martial values of the nobility. Dip persistently and passionately argues that Van can be stronger than anyone. Others panic and argue. They say the power of prohibition is for protection, not for conquest. Van quietly listens as they heatedly argue about the essence of war. He wisely says that he must compete with the abilities he has. His followers are stunned. Silence falls when he considers everything maturely and wisely. His simple but profound wisdom sincerely touches his faithful servants. The heavy atmosphere is broken by a sudden burst of laughter. Far away, someone laughs heartily and declares their complete faith in Van's great potential. After resolving the disputes, Van quickly returns to his numerous projects. The newly dug moat is still empty, waiting for water to be poured into it. He must be on the defense and maintain the aesthetic appeal of the filled moat. He takes into account the practical needs to strengthen the moat and provide water. He understands that their current methods of collecting water are not sustainable. His thoughts scatter completely as soon as the messenger bursts in panic, loudly stomping at the stop. The courier reports bandits are approaching, and the Lord orders everyone to immediately go to safety. He authoritatively gives the command, close the gate on the drawbridge. He urgently demanded to count if anyone was still outside the walls. He is struck by how quickly the peasants have learned to trust him. He notices that some peasants are still afraid of battle. He recalls how they trembled noticeably with fear after the last encounter with the enemies. He admits his own fear but understands he must appear strong to them. He sneaks away to himself to lead the frightened people into the coming battle. The peasants stand firmly and solidly, and their determination hardens as they listen to their lord. A man's hand clenches into a tight, powerful fist of determination. The peasants roar for support, vowing to fight shoulder to shoulder with him. Vance's tense expression softens, and he gives a warm, grateful smile. He immediately bursts out with a shout of tactical orders for his new soldiers. The peasants respond respectfully as he continues to direct them to their places. He rushed up the stone stairs to get a better view, but his path is suddenly and silently blocked by a maid. He urgently tells her that he has to go to the front line. A man named D orders Till to take her people and go on reconnaissance. Van watches as the confident warrior takes tactical control of the situation. D Thump's chest is filled with firm confidence in his own strength. He recalls his past, how he always wins, even when the odds seemed hopeless. His fame rests on selecting perfect battle formations and on skillful soldiers. He confidently states his control yields better results than anyone else. The man in shining armor D announces his decision to obey the orders of Lord Van. The unpredictability of the young lord has spurred his spirit. Now he is ready to risk his own life. Filled with mad joy, he declares that the events that will unfold will be truly interesting. From the watchtower, he excitedly awaits the battle and proclaims that it will be historic. He pats the young scout on the back and praises him for the ability to spot bandits from afar. From the high position it is visible, a group is approaching, running in panic. D reports their numbers within 50,100, but they are still several hundred meters away. He notices their strange behavior. They are rushing at full speed. Lord Van calmly predicts they will most likely become exhausted and fall even before they arrive. The scout voices a chilling version whether something is chasing them. Panic flares. The scout shouts that he just saw a strange story. D questions the report and wonders if everyone in the village has perfect eyesight. From below in the field of view bursts a gigantic tail and scale, and at the tip sharp spikes. The real threat is revealed by the alarm cry, an armored lizard. Jang urgently reports to Van that a whole swarm of armored lizards is chasing the bandits. He gloomily notes ordinary weapons are completely useless against their tough hide. The consultant notices magic works, but they have only two specialties. He explains that knights could strike the weaker bellies, but the peasants did not have this skill. He is gnawed by the thought of how much longer the helpless peasants will endure against the powerful claws of the creature. When panic begins to rise, Lord Van's voice cuts through the tension. He clearly gives the order to switch ballistic ammunition to heavy iron bolts. D grabs a bolt, deciding that its weight will not compare to the lizard's tough protection. A barely noticeable doubt runs through his eyes as he assesses the hopeless threat. He pauses for a moment, weighing the chances that seem impossible. During the preparation, a thought of inevitable defeat flashes in his mind for a moment. His determination hardens. He will follow Lord Van's orders without any objections. Nearby, bandits shout for help. Giant lizards descend upon them. D reports a huge herd of 40-80 lizards. This is an overwhelming force. Silently and grimly, he notes, their numbers will melt like bait and the bandits fall, one after another. Lord Wang expresses sympathy for the bandits, who are used as forced bait. D laughs loudly, sincerely apologizing for his grim mistake in the tense situation. He explains that lightness is needed to relieve tension before the decisive battle. Van gives the next command, ordering the crews to shoot when the lizards are aligned. He discourages the men, promising to bring his knights for the final strike. He summons the defenders with a mighty shout, promising a feast of grilled lizard. The bandits snort and wheeze weakly. Their desperate, exhausting escape is coming to a brutal end. Giant lizards crash into their ranks, bodies fly through the air like scattered by a shockwave. A gusty bandit lets out a terrible scream as the monsters launch their attack. The horde crashes onto the people, their giant jaws snap with deadly force. The bandits are overwhelmed by a wave, and in this scene of brutal, chaotic slaughter, they are crushed and devoured. From the wall, the defender announces that the ballista is ready to fire. The heavy siege weapon mechanism grinds until it settles into the final position of the lock. A huge iron bolt is loaded into the weapon. Its sharpened tip gleams like a blade. Commander grimly notes, with such a large target, missing will be difficult. From the battle positions, he carefully aims at the approaching horde. The firing mechanism cuts and clicks as it prepares to release its charge. A dull crack in the command to fire echoes through the wall. Massive bolts rush through the air with incredible whistling speed. With a volley of the ball shot, she crashes into the front ranks of the lizard horde with devastating force. One bolt finds its target. It hits with a bloody aim, piercing the eye of the lizard. The commander freezes in shock, asking himself if the spear suddenly disappeared after the strike. The lizards are thrown into chaos. They stumble and fall under the blow of an invisible force. Bloody splashes scatter from the creatures as powerful projectiles hit the target. The commander realizes in horror that the bolts pass through the first line completely. A more careful look shows the bolt neatly sliced through the armored leg of the lizard, piercing it through. He understands the bolts stopped only when they hit the lizards behind the first row. He notes, although the volley was unprecedented, it did not kill many of them. Lord Van is praised for creating such a crazy weapon, and he confirms that everything succeeded. The peasants go wild with excitement. A single volley destroyed 10 armored lizards. The thought burst out, give more bolts, and only then did they realize that for each ballista they have only one iron bolt per shot. Meanwhile, he makes an unexpected call to take up wooden spears. He gathers the defenders together and orders them to prepare the remaining bolts and wooden spears. The strategist notes, success has raised morale, so the second volley was more accurate. The second series of volleys, the most powerful strike the village has seen so far, bursts into the sky with a cry. The commander watches as the wooden spear he personally launched shatters on impact. To his surprise, the spear still managed to kill the creature instantly. He realizes the wooden spear penetrated the tough hide so deeply that it was enough to kill. With new firm confidence, he orders everyone to take wooden spears. His clear command to aim echoes over the gate walls. A relentless hail falls, and the final loud command orders to open fire. The valley turns into a graveyard strewn with dozens of dead lizards. Durers solemnly declared a great victory for the entire village. He announces, all armored lizards are dead, their threat has faded. The peasants burst out with a damp, joyful cry of relief and celebration. D reports to Commander Stradil, amazed that they won with only 60 spears and no losses. Stradil contemplates the victory, and he is pleased by how much Lord Vaughn has grown. Van is joyfully welcomed by his comrades, and the feeling of victory seems almost unbelievable. D proudly gestures to show the war trophies and thanks him for his efforts. Van looks at the sea of dead dinosaurs and still cannot recover from the incredible sight. He quietly admits that he still cannot believe they really won the battle. D laughs out loud, celebrating his victory thanks to the incredible ballistics of the Vans. He is impressed how even wooden spears pierce the lizard's scales hard as metal. He pats Van on the back and proclaims that the village would have perished without them. During the celebration, Van's expression suddenly changes. A thought flashes through his mind. He mentions their other enemy bandits who are still tied down below. They reminded about everything, including that during the chaos they caught about 30 bandits. He leans over the wall and orders his men to tie up the captured robbers. He reminds the robbers they have just seen the true power of the village. 2 frightened bandits can only stammer and express their agreement to his orders. The bandits brought to the village were caught and placed before the residents, who begged for their lives. They begged to be given work, fearing they would be enslaved or hanged. The old village elder reminds everyone of the great harm these people caused. A young villager screams at a robber in frenzy and shouts, his parents died because of them. In a fit of rage, he raises a bottle to strike and lay down the bandit. Lord Van gently stops him and warns, do not dirty your hands like they did then. Van asked for permission to act further from this moment. The peasant, whose rage subsides and turns into sadness, agrees to allow him. Van tells the bandits when the wagoners arrive they will be taken away. He declares until this happens they will give credit to the very village they attacked. From Battle 1, Van orders his men to start processing the remains of beast carcasses. Clear orders come from the fortress wall, exactly how to process the killed beasts. After exhaustion, the worker acknowledges the orders among the giant carcasses piled one on top of another, and the adventure miracle that this week's loot brought him a secured future. His companion openly wonders how they so easily defeated those tough monsters. Next to them, young Lord Van and the traveler Orta burst into triumphant laughter. The reality is this grand work starts and stalls because they process only a few corpses each day. Otoko realizes that they need to act and help before the valuable materials begin to spoil and rot. The next day, the travelers and peasants all together join the great carving. Van proudly declares that he personally forged new, sharper wooden knives for this. After 3 long days of exhausting work, the huge carving event finally comes to an end. Now, by the village gates, 2 gigantic mounds stand on the sides, one made of materials, the other of remains. That evening, Vantage dress-decorated the village, announcing a festive banquet feast with all the meat. He raises a large wooden mug bag, shouting an invitation to celebrate their grand victory. The village square explodes with a merry gluttony fair. The crowd laughs and shouts toasts to their lord. Young Van, his cheeks burning with excitement, prepares to bite into a meat skewer. Ordo praises the armored lizard meat, noting it is crispy on the outside and juicy inside. They talk about the high price of the meat and complain about the wastefulness that so much goes to waste. Campes also notes the beast's bones were as sharp as the weapons Van provided. His face suddenly hardens. He demands to be told where his own sword is. The adventurer proudly shows his new weapon and praises its incredible sharpness. A woman in glasses adds that her light, sharp blade is a tremendous help. Another admires the top design, a custom made by Van in just minutes. This praise ignites passion, and the travelers' crowd arrives. Everyone wants custom-made swords. As soon as Soon steps in, he promises equipment for low retainers when the money is settled. Choked by demands, Van flees headlong from the persistent crowd. He offers meat to a peasant, saying that everyone worked hard for this. The peasants continue to chatter, thank him, and ask if they should bring him more. The scene shifts to a quieter corner of this ongoing festival. 2 former bandits reflect on how strange but impressive Lord Van is. One clenches his fist and learns to thank the influence of Van's he kept him from returning to crime. His face freezes with new determination for the future. For the sake of his late family, he vows to make the village better. But for now, they decide to enjoy high-quality meat from the banquet. Somewhere sometime, Van's retainers share a drink and never thought they could smile again during a meal. The woman hesitates whether there will be other nobles who agree to celebrate with them. The frowning man quietly nods, agreeing with her sincere words. The maid calls it Van's charm, but the Spartan worries about proper noble behavior. The maid's gaze flashes. She feels that even more awaits her ahead. During the celebration, Otoko starts calculating the potential profit the loot will bring. He explains the price drops sharply if the meat rots, a quite realistic outcome. His last calculation, over 300 gold coins, completely astonished young Van. The amount explodes in his head along with the staggering figure of 300 million yen. The Spartan approaches Van and congratulates him on the victory and his hard work. The butler's expression becomes serious as he addresses the fruits of Van's labor. He announces a strict rule, 50 tax on any fees exceeding 100 gold. The news hits Van hard. He completely forgot about the tax system of this world. Van asks if they can hide the haul, but Esparta confirms it is impossible to conceal. He gloomily sank into tears, lowering his shoulders, mourning the loss of half his imaginary wealth. As part of the evidence, the real problem has already become the concern of the entire village. Van agrees, keeping their success a secret will be incredibly difficult. But his loyal butler admits there are still options. The young lord raises his gaze, his face stern, as he waits for an explanation. Esparta reveals what he means: they have to deceive the Marquis, and this is a terrible act of betrayal. This means the butler proposes to hide the truth from his longtime master. He decides to protect the future of Vans, rather than break his unwavering loyalty for himself. The vision of the elder of the Vans suggests they report everything to his brother, Lord Mershaw. The young Van immediately catches the trick to attribute the victory to his brother. Their plan is to settle with the mercenaries and give his brother the much-needed political victory. Van agrees he wants to thank Mercia for his past help in the battle for the throne. He raises his gaze to his faithful butler and weighs all the consequences of this decision. He praises his plan Spartus, calling it a wonderful proposal. The next morning, the peasants greet their lord with a friendly good morning. The delighted woman even proposes marriage herself, and the wagons, made Till twitch and shudder from this. Till playfully grabs Van's hand and teases him as if he wants attention. The scene is about warmth and increasing familiarity in the village. The peasants watch the charming sight as the lord and his maid walk side by side. With a gentle gesture, barely audible nod, Van gently lets go of her hand. Confused, he defends his dignity as a lord, but when asked about it, he begins to doubt his own seriousness. He is fighting with himself inside, trying to maintain decency and at the same time not lose this darling. A troubling thought hides within him: someday Till might leave him. He quickly concludes that her happiness must always come first. He imagines a future where she finds someone who truly interests her. Till calms him, declaring her heartfelt dream to always be near and not leave him for a step. The moment is filled with a deep, trembling feeling. Her words move Van. He tightly clasps her hands with both of his. Their intimate moment is interrupted by a guard who urgently calls Lord Vanagin. From the walls, the guard reports resellers are approaching the village. Van steers froze intently, recognizing the approaching merchants as Bell and Rango. The caravan is so far away that only a handful of dots are barely visible on the horizon. His companions are impressed by his sharp eyesight. They themselves see unclearly. Confidently declares that they are not bandits and dismisses the caution of the guards. He lays out his strategic thought, considering the possibility of a hidden threat. As a precaution, he sends Till to go to fetch Ortho. At soap distances, the wagoner's caravan travels and its inhabitants groan about their troubles. Bell explains how the broken carriage costs them a tidy sum and takes their goods. His brother Ringo sobs into the void, trembling over their huge debt and bleak prospects. Their guard asks if the settlement ahead is the nowhere city they talked about. They are stunned to see a formidable fortress instead of a simple village. Bell agrees it is much more impressive than he expected. From the wall comes a voice calling them, and Rango begins to wonder if they have taken a wrong turn. Bell recognizes the voice and tells his brother that it is the Marquis's fourth son. Van formally demands that they state their names, company, and employer. One of the guards confirms Van's identity, recalling that he is known in the city. Rango tries to piece together rumors about Van's exile from this reality. Bell officially introduces his party to Mary Chamber of Commerce. Van Asortho, if he recognizes them, must confirm that they have already met in the guild. After confirming their identity, Van gives them permission to enter the village. The merchants look on and for a moment are surprised because they are warmly welcomed. The man apologizes for being late and enters the village itself. Van gives a bright, disarming smile and officially introduces himself once again. A young blonde lord meets the approaching group of merchants with a polite smile. His face becomes serious as he prepares to get down to business with them. He immediately asks if the newly arrived merchant sells materials from the armored lizard. The merchants burst out in surprise and ask if he really defeated one of the fearsome creatures. With all their hearts rejoiced, two brothers celebrate sudden luck, thanking God for valuable materials. Van leads them to the warehouse, but their excitement fades in stunned silence. The merchants froze in shock and could not believe their eyes. They ask if he fought with the monster, a 30-meter lizard. The young lord calmly explains that he defeated 40 lizards and captured about 30 bandits. One brother is still recovering from the numbers, while the other is already starting to calculate logistics. Bill confirms that they can handle the transaction in a month and asks if Van can wait. Noticing the meat, Bell offers to buy it so it does not go to waste. The question is whether the poor neighboring village can even afford such expensive meat. Bell explains the village is on the brink of hunger and they asked him for help. He asked if he could distribute the meat for free to ease their situation. Van smiles, seeing the true character of the merchant, offers the meat for free. The merchant freezes from the boy's insight and realizes he impresses far more than the rumors say about him. As compensation, Bell generously offers to waive the fee for capturing bandits. Thanking him, Van promises the merchant a deal he will not regret during the next visit. He offers a future deal on high-quality furniture, leaving the merchant completely amazed. Smiling crookedly, Van asks if he brought along any master of his craft. Later, Balan guards marvel, admiring in wonder the excellent craftsmanship of Van's weapon. Bell admits he cannot assess how effective it is, but the artistic value is undeniable. His guard demonstrates how incredibly sharp the knife is. It cuts through the tough armored skin of a lizard. The guard confirms that the material is indeed the same legendary tough armored leather lizard hide. The blade slices through the skin with a single clean whistle without the slightest resistance. The guardians are stunned by the sharpness of the iron sword and chatter, demanding to buy the same one. Bill states that the weapon's characteristics are incredible and agrees to buy it at the asking price. Van admits that he cannot carry everything and says he can come back for it later. The deal is concluded. A new partnership bond is sealed over a box of good weaponry goods. From the height above, it is visible. Van walks together with two merchants through a neat village. That night, the merchants watched from the balcony down onto the streets of Wellet village. Savoring roasted meat, Beldeclaire stood in the village. It is truly exciting and pleasant. Inside, they discuss matters. They propose to expand the team and visit twice a month. Van agrees and notes, enough food and drink crucial to maintain morale. Then the traders nervously bring the conversation to the topic of advertising their new weapons. Venz cunningly calculates, the brothers strategically reduce everything to monopolizing his market. A small, funny version of the merchant shows that their sales are currently limited to a route that operates only on certain sections. The brothers understand they will have to rethink the entire business structure, starting with advertising. Their excitement turns into panic as they begin to figure out how to cope with this huge task at all. With a gentle smile, Van offers a revolutionary solution to deploy a permanent shop. He says that they can hire locals to run the business instead of them. Gasping with joy, the brothers nod sharply and energetically as soon as Van offers to build them a house. Van runs the plan through his mind again and realizes he is saving him time and giving the village its first store. Bell decides to stay in the village until the new store is fully opened. A small hand reaches forward to grab a bigger one. This visually shows their new agreement. The merchant looks with a confident smile, showing that he is eager to work together. Vance firmly shakes his hand and declares the negotiations a real loud triumph. The covered cart stands ready, and this marks the start of the next stage of their plan. A new chapter begins. Rango waves goodbye and sets off to convince his company. He also sent a letter to his brother, Mercia, attributing their achievements to him. After Rango leaves, Bell stands stunned before the magnificent newly built building. Van explains the plan and Bella stammers. He says he just described his vision. The maid admits she did not believe the stories about Van's power until this moment happened. A small, grateful figure sincerely thanks Vanya. The matter with the shop is already settled. That afternoon, the group sets off to the river, rustling through the overgrown path. Van, Till, and Kumsan walked together until Kumsan asked if Van was tired from the road. Kumsan takes the lead and effortlessly clears the overgrown path with his blade. He moves skillfully, his blades flicker as he cuts through the thickets with the blade. Van is initially impressed by the noble deed of his companions. They are clearing the way. But as soon as he tries to be attentive, his own fatigue immediately overwhelms him. The difficult passage through the wild terrain takes them a whole hour. Finally, they reach a wide, clear river, the place where they arrived for the new project. With a powerful thud, the ground explodes. Van begins construction. In an instant, a huge trench is mercilessly cut out of the earth. Van announces the start of construction of the new waterway channel. Major Sparta uses his magic to instantly dig several meters of earth. While Sport is being arrested, Group D and Kumsan continues digging manually. Van follows them, using his own production magic to reinforce the new walls. Sparta croaks from tension. His seemingly endless manasters are already giving out. Meanwhile, 40-year-old D laughs loudly. His physical energy knows no bounds. During the break, Til notes the colossal amount of work. Van finds genuine satisfaction in the game and in how they work together for a common goal. After 8 hours, a worker shouts that the village is already visible. Although they had enough momentum, Van yarns orders to stop work for the day. One of the workers questions the decision, believing they can finish in a few hours. Van points to the manual labor, from which those completely exhausted shudder from fatigue. But D is still full of energy and says that this is a great way to build muscles. Van is surprised. The old man still has more than enough strength after hard work. He inwardly concludes that D is a frightening but impressive fool. The next day, the waterway miraculously extends all the way to the village. Van officially announces the completion of the waterway, thanking everyone for the hard work. The construction crew shines with pride, acknowledging their incredible work achieved in half a day. Van asks his companion Bella if he is ready to move on and take the next step. With a shout of delight, Van tears the force, the earth explodes, and the dam flies into the sky. The water majestically rushes through the canal, and the whole team bursts into applause and shouts of joy. Van immediately plans his next project, a facility for filtering boiled drinking water. The passionate young man sparks in his eyes persistently and enthusiastically lays out the plan for this facility. Van quietly asks the young man if he is interested in the construction project. His embarrassed blushing confirms that he is interested, and he separately talks about his curiosity about this structure. Van understands that Lo probably has a passion for construction and notices how he is glowing with joy. He invites Lo to work on this together, and Lo accepts, shining with excitement. A detailed diagram shows their ambitious plan for the water purification system. They discuss logistics and plan to use magical crystals to easily ignite the boilers. Their plans are interrupted by a man who bursts inside and shouts, "The water passage is already full." Van is impressed by how quickly the canal filled with clear sparkling water. Esparta first praises his attentiveness, then asks about the risk of overflow during floods. He outlines engineering standards in civil construction, specifically the expansion of the water passage. As Sparta hints to build dams to hold back areas prone to flooding. He notes without an outlet the water has nowhere to go, so a reservoir is needed. Van suggests either circulating the water or digging a lake behind the village. Esparta thoughtfully weighs the construction of the lake, seeing in this the best long-term way to provide water. Van agrees with the ambitious plan, but only on the condition that they properly consider possible floods. They decide to build a new lake 200 meters behind the main village. A simple map shows the plan of the village and its location relative to the new waterway. The entire team works tirelessly to complete the large-scale project before the rainy season. In an incredible engineering feat, the large new lake was completed in 3 days. Looking at the shimmering water, Van is already considering installing a sluice in the future. He shines with pure joy, thrilled at having secured so much clean water for his people. The quiet chirping of birds announces the peaceful, slow arrival of early morning. With an empty gaze, Van suddenly jolts awake from a deep sleep in the pre-dawn hours. His maid, Till, rushed in abruptly and apologized for waking him amid the village's sudden panic. She quickly explains that Dee and Esparta have already rushed to the scene of the commotion. Till reveals the place is a new lake that the villagers named Lake Van. Van is completely stunned by this news and tries to find out where the unexpected name came from. She explains the villagers named it after his great deed so that future generations could see it. He learns that the village is now also called Van Village, a shameful and highly undesirable honor. A young follower named Lu calls out, urging Lord Van not to let him go alone. The three walk confidently towards the hustle, a quick pace and determination in every movement. Noid decides to build a separate spare entrance to avoid all this new attention. Approaching the lake, a villager points to a strange figure far out in the water. Van is completely stunned by the mysterious sight emerging from the calm surface of the lake. A mystical creature with blue hair, said to live in thickets and forest rivers, appears. It is the mythical Apkallu, half-human, half-fish, a creature Sparta calls a rare sight. The gaze of Apkallu is directed at the shore, where the entire community has gathered to watch it. Van takes a step forward, notices her youth, and asks the name of the mysterious girl. Believing that food is the key to friendship, he sends his servants for meat and fruits. The peasant crowd watches spellbound, holding their breath, and nervously swallows at the strange sight. The warrior with a stern face D watches the creature intently and attentively with his sharp gaze. Another traveler, Ortho, keeps a stern and cautious look on the tense situation. Offended by the smell of food, she stood up and asked if she could eat it. Van's exclamation surprise, and as soon as she spoke, frightened the scared, silent creature. She bolts and dives away with incredible speed, so Van shouts at her to come back. Cautiously resurfacing, she agrees to try the meat wagon that calmly offers her near the shore. Concentratedly chewing the food, she stared at the boy with big, curious eyes. She continues to eat the meat, staring intently at Van from the edge of the water. Dee watches the strange interaction, his face serious without any hints, and he himself stands on guard. Ortho, with twisted scars and a gloomy face, keeps a vigilant watch over the entire scene. The Apkalu asks who hunted the meat of the armored lizard that she is now eating. Ortho is the first to proudly give all credit to his young master Van. Espart calmly confirms the story, supporting that it was indeed Lord Van who was responsible. Without enthusiasm, he also joins in and proudly declares that all this is the heroic deeds of Lord Van. The peasants agree in chorus, despite the bustling attempts of the Vans to take the glory for themselves. Van resigns himself to the fact that in the eyes of his people he is a hero. The Apkeller listens to this conversation, her gaze is fixed on him and a new understanding appears in it. She acknowledges what she heard and begins to rustle in a small pouch she has at her side. A strange silence falls over the lake, broken by a small splash that cuts into this calm atmosphere. Van sat on the shore and had no idea what that strange, silent gathering meant. The next morning the door flew into the room. His maid screamed his name in hysteria. She apologizes and explains that the peasants are in panic because they expect some attack that is about to come. Still half sober after sleep, Van processes the alarming news about the attack on the village. While he quickly changes, he learns the enemy has already reached the main regime. His face hardens with irritation. His precious sleep has been interrupted again. Declaring their actions unforgivable, he abruptly breaks out to meet the new threat face to face. Beneath him, his defenders have already taken positions near the giant ballistae, ready for a tense battle. The regime is filled with an incredible number of figures, a silent aquatic invasion. Two companions of Van are ready for battle and closely watch the strange newcomers. The defenders on the wall are tense, hands on weapons preparing for battle. Van understands the aliens are not lizards. These are the very mythical Apkalu about whom it was said earlier. He notes that unlike yesterday, this group includes people of all ages and genders. A strong crowned man steps forward. Apkalu appears and orders to summon the boy to speak directly. Under the gaze of the leader, terrifying and tense, Van suddenly feels an icy fear. Frightened, he asks his strongest allies to stay close to support him. Ortho is delighted, explaining that the Kaihou app is endowed with rare and valuable trading materials. He impatiently asked for permission to take a closer look at potential new clients. The group stands on the wall and looks at the app color leader in the water below. The leader admits that he came because Van fed his daughter yesterday. He also says that he heard it was Van who defeated the armored lizard. Van's confirmation ripples through the gathered Apkalakron in a wave of whispers. His companions watch as the crowd inquires, is he a powerful mage or does he have strong allies? The leader declares that he recognizes the young man as a true hero. After that, he makes a stunning proposal. Van and his daughter Lotta Priora must marry. Van is completely stunned by the sudden and completely unexpected marriage proposal. He is overwhelmed by panic. Inside, he cannot comprehend what this strange arrangement means. His thoughts go wild. Who is Lotta Prior and what does their wedding even mean? A feeling of Russian confusion and complete shock after the proposal spreads in the air. Ladivesta introduces herself and praises the beauty of her daughter and her future potential. Van notices that girl. She is happily playing with friends in the water. He teases the talks about marriage, understanding that she is just an uninformed child. Ladivesta explains the trouble of her clan. By the river he lost many friends. They were torn apart by armored lizards. He shows that he wants to have a safe home and a strong man for his daughter. Van cuts through politics directly, promising to protect them regardless of any marriage. Many Esther asks if his people can live in fashion and calls Van my son. Then he politely asks them to move to the back lake so as not to scare the visitors. Van is stunned, digesting the fact that Lotta Vesta just called him her son. He frantically tries to deny the marriage as soon as the Apokalo begin to leave. Lotta Priora waves to him and cheerfully exclaims, "See you, hubby," and he vehemently denies it. Ortho urgently begs Dee to provide rare materials for his shop from their new allies. The Spartan notices great luck in being on good terms with the Kaihou app. He worries about how others will perceive this strange engagement with Apkala. Till is completely confused. She doesn't know how to react to her lord's new bride. The group worries about possible quarrels while the Kaihou app joyfully plays loudly downstairs. The Epicholo children splash and laugh in the new home without any tension. Exhausted, Van resignedly accepts his new role, their lord and protector. He builds two huge structures resembling boathouses as a place to rest. Apollo is delighted with the new homes and immediately asks for more space. Van is glad they like the design and notes that it is foreign to Scuteria. Sparta praises Van's quick understanding of others' concepts while they plan their next project. Soon the residents of Opkalu begin trading vegetables and meat among themselves. The Kalu app turned out to be reliable miners. They continuously delivered ore to the village warehouse store. Van is glad to see how the two communities come closer and enjoy time together. They proposed a new ambitious plan to build a second, stronger defensive wall for the village. He suggests to build a huge wall rampart that can accommodate 10,000 inhabitants. He insists that a large rampart is more effective. Fewer guards are needed for the perimeter. Van doubts and wonders if there will really be enough people to move to such a remote place. Insisting that they plan ahead, D warns, expanding later will be more difficult. He even jokes that their stubborn companion Sparta is an obstacle that must be considered in the plan. Van is stunned by the proposed scale. He heard about 600-meter bases for guilds. Deadvises start with a modified wall. It can be taken and built on a full scale later. With a new idea proposed by Van, they need to reconsider the square shape of the fortress. It shows round fortresses are weak against magic, so square ones are the standard. Then Van makes a sketch of his revolutionary concept, a magnificent star-shaped fortress. He says that 6 outer triangles will function as independent, detachable defensive forts. This design drives attackers into a kill zone. They have to withstand fire from 3 sides at once. Der Reflex talks about how similar forts on Earth led to cannons, acknowledging the advantage. He understands the strategy, forcing enemy fighters to converge into a dense, vulnerable strike. Their plan is suddenly interrupted by a man who bursts into the room bringing serious news. The messenger reports in panic. A representative from Count Ferdinando has already arrived. And another man says that the arrivals carry not only the Count's coat of arms. They also raise into the sky a unicorn and the shield of Viscount Cayenne, a young, rising aristocrat. At his home, Van processes the news. The former village ruler has sent people. A heavy silence descends as he wonders whether the Count intends to take it back. The rumbling of the carriage wheel on the dirt road announces the arrival of a guest. 2 women stand before the village. One has decided to check if the rumors about this wunderkind are true. As the carriage clatters over the cobblestones, a voice announces that they will arrive very soon. In the rattling transport, 2 travelers continue to make their way to the village. In the glove, a hand gently touches the hair of a young girl, offering quiet reassurance. The young girl nods quietly and uncertainly without a single word in response. The determined gaze of the woman is fixed on the Golto. Get a closer look at their master. Inside, Van's retainers bustled noisily, preparing the reception for their important guests. Van breaks away from the spot and prepares for the meeting, resigned. Whatever happens will happen. The doors open and 2 girls appear to meet them, an unexpected sight for the guards who were expecting others. The confident Viscount Panamera Cayenne introduces himself to the young Lord Van. A shy young girl introduces herself, Art, and says that she is the youngest daughter of Count Ferdinando. Van Sharp assesses the situation, concluding that Panamera is his powerful guardian of art. Despite inner fear, Van politely and reservedly welcomes the guest in the nameless village. Sitting, Van contemplates the impressively rapid rise of Panamera through noble ranks. He concludes that her appearance must correspond to her unique strength and intelligence. Panamera directly asks Van if he knows the reason for their unexpected visit. He immediately sees her straightforwardness as a tactic to read his true motives. He gives his own sharp analysis of the complex political situation between their houses. He ends his theory with a humble statement that it is only a guess. Panamera bursts out laughing, impressed by the incredible foresight of an 8-year-old. She confirms that his guess hit the mark, admitting, the Count is wary of the Marquis. A quiet appearance here after years when he was a famous genius looks suspicious. She cannot understand why a person with such a name was sent to the wilderness. As a child prodigy about whom rumors circulated, he should have been trained to develop the territory. His location on the border between council land and another kingdom is frightening. The true goal of the Count is to find out whether Marquis has ambitions beyond his own position. Van Kamlai claims that he was simply removed and rejects any other remarks. Panamera looks at him intently, trying to see the truth in his simple words. Tired of his explanations, she boldly asked if he was telling the truth. She believes that the rumor about the child genius was just a rumor, a usual, simple rumor. But she sighs, recalling that this settlement, as they said, had only 100 people. She points out he built a wall and rebuilt houses in just 2 months. Here in all its glory are also shown his extremely experienced butler and skillful knight servant. From her rough estimate, her face becomes serious as she assesses his forces. She asks if he dispatched about 5,000 subordinates to accomplish all this. Their faction interprets any unnoticed activity as a potential and serious threat. She concludes that the sign probably has very high expectations of him. The idea that he is building a military outpost makes Vans barely contain his laughter. He explains their view seems logical, but he was very quickly expelled. The silhouette of an angry knight looms and the tense atmosphere abruptly breaks, returning to normal. Van bursts into uncontrollable laughter, unable to restrain his curiosity. He says the more serious the situation becomes, the funnier it seems to him. Apologizing, he announces that he intends to set everything straight due to an obvious misunderstanding. He admits that his father allowed him to lead generally only with minimal baggage in one companion. Art flinches, recalling how her own father quietly and wordlessly expelled her from the city. Panemura asks how he will explain his numerous retinue if they abandoned him. Transition panel. D steps forward, explaining that they saw huge potential in Vans and followed him voluntarily. Transition panel. He laughs, admitting that he ignored his commander's letter and waits for dismissal. In response, Aspart tells his own reasons briefly and simply, saying that he is already an old man. He perceived Van's departure as a chance to retire and turned what he teaches into a hobby. He made an advertisement where Van treats lower-class people as equals with impeccable kindness. Van confirms their stories and expresses deep gratitude for their unwavering loyalty. Panemura asks how he can explain the incredible and such a rapid change of the village. Van, barely squinting with a hint of a smile, suggests the demonstration will be much more effective. He gestures for them to follow him outside, leaving them in suspense. Transition panel with movement. Transition frame showing movement. Transition panel with movement. Outside the disciplined formation of men, they stomp their feet in unison, and this loud pounding together awakens the prohibition. Panemura gives the order to her troops to observe the events from a safe distance. The peasants pour out in a crowd, curiously pushing into all this commotion. Van orders his men to bring the necessary wooden blocks for the demonstration. Transition panel, a group walks along the road. A strange procession makes its way through a wide, completely open space. They stop in the middle of a desolate, empty field. Panemura looks with a wary expression and wonders how far they will go. Van looks back, sensing that she might suspect the ambush that is about to be prepared. He negotiates with Esparta, choosing the ideal place to start construction. He plans to place the walls 2 meters apart from each other so that changes can be made in the future. He turns to his stunned guests and declares that he will build the wall right now. The ground explodes, a huge wall of earth tears itself from the landscape. Van explains that the wall is unstable and will crumble as soon as his mana runs out. He shows that it is made from a complex combination of all available materials in the earth. Panemura is still shaking from the demand to report what he has done. She asked if he used those same materials to build rural houses. He announces his next feat, drawing and erecting sturdy gates right on the spot. With a gentle smile, young Lord Van shows the majestic gates he has just created. The young noble Lady Art approaches him and inquires about the nature of his magical gift. His formidable guard Panemura demands to know what she just saw and how he did it. Trying to hold a tense gaze, she interrogates him with her very being and asks who he is. Van calmly reveals his secret. He says that he has production magic and he can only create things. A tremor runs through Artis. She remembers that this is the magic called the most unlucky. His words echo in her head while her heart beats wildly from the incredible revelation. A new chapter begins. It is called Art and shows a sad doll in a dark room. Her story begins with a memory of her father, who is always too busy to see her. Holding her own doll, she recalls how her family made her feel completely worthless. She remembered how she was timid, how she failed her studies, and how she felt she was incapable of anything. A glimmer of hope flashes in her young, determined eyes. Her one and only unique gift is the strange gift of marionette magic. Despite her own clumsiness, she could control dolls as if they were her own body. She playfully makes the little doll dance with a snap of her fingers. A joyful blush spreads across her face as she finds her true purpose. Imagining how her parents would finally be proud of her, she feverishly practiced her magic. Besides her own affairs with the rabbit, she feels nervous and at the same time filled with hopeful excitement. She decides to put on a life-size doll dance for them. But her reliable sleep is broken by a sudden cruel sound. Her mother's face twists with rage as she screams that Artie is a bad child. He already remembered how he could never understand her mother's sharp and overly strong anger. Tears well up. She realizes her only hope, her magic, is also already deemed useless. After that day, her mother didn't even look at her, and no one spoke to her. Choking on guilt, she believed she had let the family down and shattered their high hopes. Her face is a mask of torment as she sobs, feeling completely and utterly alone. A year later, when she was 10, her father calls her to him for the first time in a long while. He coldly dismisses her worries about the summons and orders her to obey. She stealthily glanced at the mysterious woman nearby and wondered who she was. The woman's heels clink as she says that the reception will determine the outcome. Art shuddered and quietly, barely noticeably, introduced herself to the unseen one. The woman introduces herself as V, introduces Count Panemura, and asks about Art's marriage. Panemura explains if the groom bride is suitable, the arrangement will proceed. She reassures the frightened artifact, if it turns out unsuitable, they will discard it. Art panics, thinking she was told to leave because she is no longer needed. Panemura clarifies that the elder brothers and sisters of Art are already engaged, so she is the last option. With a kind smile, Panemura playfully touzles Art's hair, hoping he is good. In that gentle touch, the Art is finally noticed for the first time. The next 3 weeks in the carriage with Panemura became the most wonderful time she had ever experienced. She recalls how Panemura, although often angry over trifles, was fundamentally kind. When Art called herself useless, Panemura scolded her and then hugged her tightly. During conversations, Viscount often gently rubbed her head. It was a constant sign of care. Just the memory of those moments brings a tear of happiness to her eye. Even when she cried with joy, Panemura never got angry, he just patted her on the head. They stand together, a strong bond of trust is born between them. Art came for the love of Lady Panemura's hands, gently clasped them in hers. For her, these were gentle, warm, and truly magical hands. Panemura laughed and said that in her hands there were only scars in magic. When they approached the village, Artie had already decided she did not want to marry him. She decided to keep her distance and looked at him as if she were an outsider. The profile angle shows Van's serious and determined facial expression. She admits to herself that Lord Vogan is clearly a special person. He is her complete opposite. His followers adore him and he is easy to talk to. Younger than her, he is full of talent and confidence, which she lacks. She weeps over her fate. Her father silently expelled her from the city. She does not understand how he can be so different from her, and weighing their different paths, she asks herself a question. Her face froze in deep, thoughtful sorrow, and in this reflection there was a faint anxiety. His words about the wonder he accomplished turned her envy into captivating interest. Recalling how important elementary magic is, she wonders if she could be like him. The desire to try again, a little stronger, flared up in her heart. Panemura watches Van's work and states that his magic is incredibly strong. Van tells how his father drove him away, not even suspecting his true powers in full measure. Panemura shoved the foolishness into size, and only then did he realize the domain could have grown exponentially. Van suggests for now to move back and continue building the wall tomorrow. Panemura looks over her work and asks if he himself built the houses on the drawbridges. She questions the strength and nature of the materials from which he constructed the structure. Although she is not completely satisfied, Panemura admits that she now understands the situation. Van nods and aloud with a joyful smile confirms that the misunderstanding has been resolved. Panemura says that she was also tasked with discussing Art's marriage. Van confirms he does not want to fight with anyone, so the marriage is unnecessary. This only heightens the intrigue for Panemura. The village is definitely doomed to grow. With a burning smile, she shifts her gaze directly to Lord Van himself. She admits that as soon as she first heard about the marriage plans, she sharply disliked it. She knew Art would be unhappy in a potentially hostile, distant land. Van listens attentively, acknowledging the validity of her protective concerns. They show pale Art, who imagines icy harassment or a bloody end in a future without hope. Panemura admits she came to find any reason to break the marriage between them. Van agrees her logic really makes sense if you see them as two drops of water. She decided that Arta is simply mourning the lost future in the spirit of tragic heroism. But now she declares her full and passionate support for their engagement. She praises Van's mature foresight, his logic, and unwavering devotion to his subordinates. With a warm smile, she says that if he were her age, she herself would not object to marrying him. Van is completely embarrassed and deeply moved by such a high compliment from her. The comedic schedule shows how his impression of her rapidly rises along with excitement. Panemura returns to the conversation about Art and says that the decision depends on how they both feel. Holding Art close, she says her role is finished. The two must decide together. Art, sobbing, admits, Van is a good person but he doesn't know what to do. Van panics, offering him already a place in the village without any obligation to marry. Art quietly exhales with relief immense from his generous offer. Panamera indicates that the marriage will greatly help Van politically. She prophesies his rare strength will lead him to achievement even on the level of his own father. The alliance with Art would guarantee support from the Count even within Panamera itself. She laughs and admits the offer is so advantageous it smells like fraud. Van tears his brain with reasoning, asks one question after another, trying to understand the benefit for Count Fernando. Panamera adjusts her smile and enjoys how everything in their negotiations has turned upside down. She announces that they will stay overnight, giving him the whole day to think. Van is shocked by their sudden decision to stay overnight in his village. Panamera laughs, finally behaving like a boy his age. Embarrassed, Van asks if her soldiers are staying as well. She says it is frightening for a delicate lady in enemy lands and wants her allies nearby. Panamera asks what Lady Art thinks about staying at the mansion Lord Van. The young girl is madly embarrassed and blushes, desperately insisting that she could never share one bed. Noticing her panic, Van mentally notes that she is only 10 and not ready at all. Panamera pulls the frightened Art into warm embraces, admitting she is still just a child. With a joyful smile, Van offers to build them a separate cabin right now. The soldiers, who are waiting to sleep together, react enthusiastically to the news. Having invited the guests to dinner, Van sends them to the new camp to rest. In the kitchen, the Vans pretended to be preparing wolf meat, processed on a large scale. He enthusiastically talks about the rare and valuable fangs and claws of the creature. Till passionately declares that she will cook the tastiest dish so that their marriage will definitely succeed. Van took it back and interrogates why she supports the union. Till admits that she will feel lonely, but believes that she will already become a good support for him. She explains a good wife sets healthy boundaries and everything becomes simpler. Another retainer, Kamsi, agrees that Art is a good choice, but would prefer someone stronger. Esparta's own servant arrives and declares the marriage brings no benefit to Art's father. Van correctly concludes the Art, it seems, was also expelled without elemental magic, just like him. According to Sparta's thinking, the seizure of Viscount Panamera by force of Vans is most likely real. However, he warns the marriage will cause significant changes in circumstances. The agreement will grant the Count and the Viscount access to the fortress blueprints and weapons. Van adds his connection with the Kaihou app to the list of possible interests, based on concerns that Ban's father will likely break the engagement for his own plans. The advice explains his father may resort to cunning tactics to drive the Count into poverty. Vancule notes that the prospects of such political maneuvers are frightening. Around him, loyal servants, Van declares that his readiness for Art is the main priority. His eyes flash with determination as he decides how to act next. A new chapter waiting for tomorrow starts in the grand dining hall. Silverware rings at the table as Van addresses Lady Art. With a gentle smile, he hints that they could make candies together somewhere soon. Arta was so flustered that he spoke to her, barely managing a shy, affirmative yes. She finds it hard to respond properly, and before starting the conversation, she sincerely thanks for the delicious dish. In the background, Till clenches his fist in triumph, delighted by the praise. She already admits that she herself is terribly shy and says she stutters because almost no one talks to her. She nervously casts a furtive glance at the young lord, stealing all her courage. Relief washes over her as soon as she sees he does not look at her with contempt. She recalls how the talented Lady Panamera immediately approved of him. Van gently continues the conversation and asks what things she likes. He shines and admits that he also loves cute things like little animals. She shows that she prefers inanimate things, dolls, and beautiful flowers. Interested in her attention to dolls, Van admits he hasn't seen many either. He politely asks if she will show him her dolls, and she shyly agrees. The adult, patient nature of Art strangely calms. Remembering her dolls, whether in the carriage, she plans to show them to him tomorrow. Van's sincere smile and the words "thank you" for her praise touch us right in the heart. While she continues to eat, a new strange feeling begins to stir within her. Her heart pounds with an anxious anticipation she cannot explain. She clutches the front of her dress, overwhelmed by the new feeling. Panamera watches the young girl's reaction with an ironic, sly smile. The continued sly smile of the old woman makes the embarrassed Artie look away. Art recalls how Lord Wang continued talking with her about a bunch of different things. She feels herself getting used to him being nearby and catches herself wanting to talk more. Inside her grows the desire to question him and meet his gaze. She clenches her fist, firmly deciding to find the courage to speak to him herself. The three sit down at the long dining table in silence and a restrained, official atmosphere. Panemura sits very close to Art close during the meal, as support. Panemura's comment about the peace from the village makes Art shrink. He cannot utter a word. Later, Panemura praises the tasty food and quality ingredients, forbidden for the ban. She also notes how the villagers greet their lord with respect and admiration. Van modestly declines the praise and credits the Tillo kitchen for keeping their fighting spirit. Panemura calls him modest and jokes she would be boasting about such achievements all over the city. Again, she gives credit to her subordinates for the collected materials, downplaying her own role. Art looks at them from afar, nervously clutching his hands to his chest. Panemura says goodbye to them for the evening, promising to meet again tomorrow. The dot panel crosses the stage. Van noticed the art of hesitation, as if she hesitates whether she has something she wants to say. He approaches her and asks what happened, and she stands as if frozen in place. After 5 long minutes of silence, Art finally begins to speak. Her hands tremble and fumble as she gathers every bit of her own courage. She sharply blurts out thanks for the day and admits that talks about the engagement make her nervous. In the rush of haste, she confesses his kindness is a great support and comfort to her. Before he can respond, she wishes him good night and swiftly disappears. Van was left surprised and pondered. Her response was not so bad after all. Art flies down the corridor, reproaching herself for speaking too quickly, and runs away from it. In panic, she freezes and suddenly realizes she doesn't know where her room is. A small cartoon version of herself points in the right direction. She finally reaches her room and sees that Panemura is already inside, undressed. Panemura playfully pounces on her and pins her to the bed, teasing with a question about how the time with Van went. Mortified, Art throws his hands up, shouting that there was no line to be crossed. Panemura suggests staying a few more days instead of leaving tomorrow. Art quietly agrees and the blush still falls on her cheeks. She decides to offer money to pay for their extended stay in the village. Clenching her teeth with determination, she vows to start a conversation with Van tomorrow. That night, Art looks to the future and with hope believes he will listen to her. The next morning, it is announced that Esparta will lead the construction of the fortifications. The man addressed the gathered villagers and warned, "Be careful with the big project." This team was entrusted with gathering supplies with the help of strong people. The announcer's overview slides towards another group in the crowd. Or that team jokingly asks Van why he lined up together with the workers. Van explains that they are hunting the magic beast again because the villagers really like the swords he forged. He outlines the plan, sell the good materials and keep the rest. Van addresses the crowd, wishing them a safe day of work on the wall. Then he announces a big barbecue on Friday, and Saturday the village is shocked. The crowd erupts with a loud roar, fists clenched up in excitement on the edge. Those who once sat silently in silence, the villagers turn into a joyful farewell crowd. Panemura greets Van and notes his interesting and effective speech. He replies that since this is not a formal army, one can be simple and without strain. Panemura laughs and adds that the promise of extra alcohol for the best performers really helps. Art approaches Van and Panemura, her steps hesitant. She flinches when her gaze falls on Van's but does not retreat. Van notices her with a look, a pleasant surprise flashes across his face. He says a gentle good morning, and she stammers and replies in kind. Young Lord Van, with a gentle smile, notes that Lady Art now looks full of energy. Art confirms her renewed strength, clenching the air with her palms as she gathers courage. Raising her eyes and shining with light, she mentally expresses a desire to become closer. The scene sharply switches to heavy footsteps, a thud echoing dully through the dense forest. 2 figures, Ortho and companion, breathe heavily as they flee from an invisible pursuer. In a memory, skilled subordinates of Panemura are shown. They diligently build a village. Their work progressed so rapidly that it almost outpaced the fundamental wall of Sparta. Van recalls how he then built powerful ballistae on the wall. After dinner, his companions pulled the extended exhaust further so that he could continue learning. A brilliant transition shows that time has passed since those events. In just 2 weeks, a massive wall with 2 forts was completed. Van notices that building the town in parts is a pleasant activity. A comedic sound emphasizes the blow he gave Panemura. She jokes that her own fortifications stand prouder than usual, as if she has Panemura's size. Avoiding eye contact, Van strictly orders himself. He is not stupid enough to touch. A tall waterfront wall looms over the endless forested landscape below. The little embarrassed Van cannot gather his thoughts together. Panemura announces that their next task is to build houses and attract more residents. A man with silver hair smiles and says his personal dream is to have his own land. Panemaragrans plans a future victory so great that he can claim land as payment. Suddenly, a devastating explosion bursts from the distant forest, and the walls tremble from the shockwave. A frightened Ortho appears and shouts that their pursuer has managed to break free. In confusion, the truck asks what exactly slipped away from them. A colossal armored dragon tears through the forest edge through the line of trees with devastating force. Orta and his companions stare in horror, interrogate why the dragon ended up here. Panemara realizes that they are being used as bait to win Van time and escape. Holding onto the wall, Van cannot help but think, how will they possibly defeat such a huge creature? The face hardens with the grim awareness that people can be truly seriously wounded. Several determined men step forward and declare that they are ready to fight. Panemara grimly agrees to help, understanding that the dragon will reach them anyway. Van grits his teeth clenched, and in his gaze flashed a pure, unwavering resolve. Seizing command, he orders the Ortho's squad to retreat behind the rampart. He throws all available hands to the wall and orders them to close the gate. A majestic height of the newly built fortress wall is shown. Panemara identifies the beast as the power of a dragon and gives his own orders. The frightened artist calls the name Lord Von with a trembling voice. Van turns to the scared girl, and his face softens with concern. He admits to himself, of course he should be afraid. Apologizing for scaring her, he tries to dispel her fears. He reminds her that they have stronger ballistae and an elemental mage on their side. The vertical panel gives a sharp, black and white transition. He points out that the formidable Panemara is also here to help them. Confidently smiling, he promises that they will not lose the battle. He has already moved from his place, wishes him luck, and desperately begs him not to die. Vonnen orders his servant Till to escort the still frightened Lady Art to the estate, or those parties are desperately rushing towards the gigantic fortified gates. Dragonflies trail behind them as they shout for the gate to remain open. Van gives the ballista operators the order, aim to miss the fleeing one. One of Ordo's comrades stumbles and falls, and this instantly paralyses the rest with shock. The woman tells the others to go on without her and not to worry about her fate. Ordo turns towards the dragon taunt and shouts to attract its attention to himself. His attempt fails. The dragon continues its advance, completely ignoring him. The dragon suddenly dives down, its gaze fixed on Ordo, and he immediately realizes he is the target. He is sure he is doomed, yet still shouts for the others to leave him and move on. In a moment, Cusula lunges forward and flies past Ordo, becoming a new decoy to save his boss. The superior leader of the trust party, Cusala, with his super speed, will be able to return alive. Cusala comically whines aloud that he has only a lizard's tail left. Van notices, despite their jokes, their determination is deadly serious. From the command post, Van orders the ballistic team to line up for a volley. Gritting his teeth, he grimly jokes that Cusala looks appetizing and they need to shoot quickly. Cusala runs for his life, and behind him, a huge dragon roars menacingly. From his place on the wall, Panagura declares that she can stop the dragon from moving. Shouting decisively, the blonde warrior declares that she will attack first. Van watches, having predicted this, knowing that she is a veteran of title fights. A close-up on Magielavri confirms his conclusion: she is top level. Darkened energy swirls in. This confirms his assessment: she is a powerful elemental mage. A colossal spear of fire and shadow bursts from her position and flies toward the beast. A swirling vortex of magical energy cuts across the battlefield with dazzling flashes. The fiery spear squad continues its destructive path towards the distant dragon. The dragon sees a grand magical attack flying straight at it. With powerful wing beats, the dragon precisely dodges the main attack. A close-up shows the destructive power of the mist magical projectile. Dodging, the dragon receives a hail of arrows from the Avelia ballista. Van calculates that about half of their shots should hit the target. He hopes that piercing its body, wings, and legs will slow this creature down. Realizing the bolts are effective, he immediately orders a second volley. Another massive wave of heavy bolts crashes down from the walls. This time, the bolts hit the dragon and fall to the ground with a feudal most without effect, but it becomes fiercely enraged. Van grimly notes the failure of the second Bailey, concluding that the first caused significant damage. The soldier exhales with relief, as if miraculously surviving this encounter. Van quickly abandons his hopes, saying that the dragon has not been defeated yet. Panemara casts another powerful spell to buy time for the evacuation. Her strike flies straight into the monster, and the explosion tears everything around apart. Fire magic covers the dragon completely, while Panemara closely watches the strike. The explosion deafens the ears, a dull roar like a disaster of fire and power. The dragon roars wildly in pain, fully immersed in the raging burning fire. Panemura contemplates the frightening versatility and power of her magic. She announces her return to the village to prepare a real counterattack. Van gives the order, shouting for everyone to run to the village for safety. He inspects the wounded wings of the dragons. Now it can only catch up with them on foot. Van realizes this magical creature is a unique being, a class that no one else has. A brave soldier offers to cover the rear while the group continues to retreat. Van protests and shouts that a physical fight against the monster will be futile. The gray-haired man, Esparta, passes them by silently, quickly, with a clear purpose. Van shouts his name and, stunned, sees how Sparta heads straight for the dragon. Sparta calmly walks towards the approaching beast and orders the others to run away. He continues confidently moving forward, ignoring Van's desperate cries to flee. Van freezes in fear as Sparta walks towards certain death. His fear turns into defiance when he refuses to run without Sparta. Sparta turns away and smiles as if with a smirk, acknowledging that this complicates his plan. Sparta prepares for a noble sacrifice, but Van snatches him from his hands and refuses to run alone. A massive dragon glides over the wall, flying low and releasing a powerful energy blast. The dragon's attack crashes into the stone wall with a roar. The explosive impact echoes as a catastrophic wave. The ground rumbles and settles as the explosion tears the battlement wall to pieces. Jumping out of the dust, Esparta sees that Van did not lose composure during the attack. Esparta slowly retreats, gloomily thinking that their time has passed. Van claps his hands, urging us to start running, and promises red wine as a reward. Describes the difficulty of running for an old man, but still agrees to try. Van orders Kamzin to accompany Sparta while he commands the defense, then suddenly rushes away. He rushes along the huge stone wall, tearing forward to the village and his squads. With heavy whistling breath, Van feels as if the village is spread out at an unimaginable distance as he keeps running. The mental limit breaks. Ortho's party wheezing collapses exhausted, on the edge. From the walls above, Panemura calls Van, reporting that her forces are already in position. Van says that the villagers are also ready, orders them to aim and prepare. Panemura lowers her gaze and asks where exactly she should act next. Van Shotz's encouraging heart rises. Don't panic, don't rush, aim slowly. At Panemura, an expression of complete concentration while she waits for her orders. Van freezes for a moment, suddenly realizing this mighty warrior is asking him for orders. He quickly makes a plan and orders her to stop the dragon if it reaches them. He further explains that then they will give a synchronized volley from the ballistae. Panemura's uncertainty disappears instead. A broad, confident smile appears and she praises the plan. She apologizes for her delay, excited about the new challenge, and promises dragon meat. The dragon begins to break out of the stone prison, stirs, and comes alive again. Van Shotz in alarm report that the dragon is coming, and his face pales with urgency. A deafening roar and the beast breaks its chains and rushes forward at incredible speed. Hiding behind cover, Van realizes they need to buy a little more time for his friends to escape. The deputy commander suddenly rushes forward and shouts for everyone to retreat. He will do everything himself. Two of his comrades are amazed by his speed and are confident that they can achieve success. He throws himself directly into the trajectory of the monster dragon approaching him. With a fierce battle cry, D prepares to meet the beast's attack head-on. The massive claw of the dragon swings down with lethal force on the lone warrior. Dion, two comrades who boldly confront dragons and stop their furious charge. The strike sends a powerful shockwave through the armored soldiers. A huge wall of stone suddenly bursts from its place, hits the dragon, and pushes it back. Van watches anxiously as the wave of battles changes direction again. Esparta observes the scene with a grim, determined expression. Esparta rushed forward, sensing the approaching danger and preparing to act. The magical stone wall crumbles under the colossal power of the dragon. The dragon breaks the barrier with explosive, unstoppable force. Van urgently calls a Spartan messenger to hurry immediately while they continue to retreat. Two junior soldiers grimly nodded to the order and dashed into cover. The marbles are amazed at their strength and endurance, and they just can't figure out how they became so strong. Esparta explains that D, with his vast experience, is the fastest of all. A close-up shows the dragon's threatening maw with sharp teeth. Two junior soldiers look around in horror as the dragon advances on them. She sees the trap. The lever is pulled. The name Van Shot's Panemura flashes, and it's an order to attack. Panemura's eyes narrow with concentration as she growls her confirmation. She releases her mighty spell, shouting its name, Fire Javelin. A giant spear of flame bursts out, covering the dragon with a whirlwind of fire. Van freezes for a moment, stunned by the pure destructive power of the spell. He quickly recovers and orders to lower the ballast die on the western side of the fire. The dragon thrashes wildly in agony, trapped in the fiery vortex. A downpour of huge iron bolts crashes down on the beast, breaking into hail and striking its hide with laughter. The dragon's agility allows it to dodge most of the projectiles. Yet several bolts find their target and sink deep into its flesh. Those that hit inflicted severe wounds, and the beast was broken and bleeding. Vens shouts for the rest of the ballistae to fire everything they have at the beast. Panemura watches the attack, her face showing focused, tense concentration. The dragon finally chokes, its massive body collapses to the ground. Van surveys the aftermath, noting, the wounds are fatal despite its attempt to protect its head. Panemura carefully orders the crews to prepare for another volley and stand ready. She tests Dai with a dangerous task to verify the dragon's death. Carefully on tiptoe, she crosses the rubblestone battlefield to the fallen beast. The ballistae team watches spellbound, holding their breath, swallowing their nerves. Dee stands before a giant dragon's head, lying motionless among the ruins. Carefully extends his sword and lightly nudges the creature's mouth with the tip. The eye of the seemingly dead dragon suddenly opens wide. Its jaw leaps forward to attack. A flash of movement fills the panel. Dee reacts with incredible speed. Catching a hoarse breath, he swings his colossal greatsword with force, delivering a mighty upward strike. Panemura watches the final, decisive blow calmly and attentively. The massive dragon's body crashes to the ground with a rumble, now truly dead. Relief washes over Van as he quietly says they are now safe. He abruptly turns, his cloak swirling like a whirlwind, ready to address his victorious troops. He raises his hand high and calls them to roar victory. The soldiers erupt in a massive, joyful shout, celebrating the hard-won victory. Laughter and cheers of the crowd echo in the air, filling the village with relief. Raised fists and joyful faces are living proof that they endured. The celebration continues above the large stone building, stretches a sea of happy faces. A crowd of peasants and soldiers chat excitedly. Relief is felt in the air. Their faces shine with joy and amazement at the incredible victory. Two young women Till and Art rush towards Vogan and ask if he is okay. Van calms them and sends Till to check on his exhausted soldiers. Later, Van sits on a crate and, sighing with relief, finally allows himself to rest. Panemura approaches with confident footsteps, playfully tousling his hair. She congratulates him on the command and on their success in defeating the dragon. They discuss the weight of their victory, acknowledging how close they came to disaster. Panemura describes the destruction the dragon could have caused and calls them lucky. They could not help but ask if the City of Accounts would really be so vulnerable. Panemura pays tribute to her mighty allies of Sparta in the huge D. Van Beams proudly boasts about his allies and their future potential. Panemura playfully slaps her forehead, reminding him of his mighty ballista. Van's ambitions grow. He imagines an even mightier weapon, and this thought frightens Panemura. She changes the subject, announcing that they need to hold a dragon destruction ceremony. She explains the tradition of naming the best among the contributors with the title Dragon Slayer. Van is puzzled by the very idea of giving up such a magnificent title. The ceremony begins with preparations for a solemn announcement. From the balcony, a man announces to the crowd that the forest dragon has been killed. He declares that he intends to name the key figure who helped them. The crowd below, along with Dee and Esparta, listens with bated breath. The announcer bestows the honor on Viscount Panemura Cayenne, and he accepts the recognition. An intense flash of light reveals a tense atmosphere. A crowd of peasants stands under strict watch. Faces are focused and impassive. Panemura weighs the worth of Van's understanding. Dragon threats usually require knights and court wizards. She grips the balcony railings and declares that they survived with minimal losses, and this seems an incredible achievement. Amid the crowd's murmur, she prepares to name the greatest contributors to their victory. First, she honors the deputy commander D for beheading the dragon and ending the battle. Then she introduces the extraordinarily rare and incredibly powerful elemental master wizard, Esparta. His incredible magical skills, she explains, raised his contribution to second place in magnitude. The peasants freeze in delight, whispering about the spark and incredible magical power. Finally, she casts a glance at the little boy beside her, ready to make her last announcement. From the balcony, her voice thunders, naming the fourth son on the poster, Lord Vanferio. The crowd below erupts in loud applause. Their hands are raised in a united celebration. She praises his intelligence, magic, and leadership, stating that his contribution is the third largest. Overwhelmed with emotions but satisfied, Van waves to the crowd that adores him with a bright, happy smile. Applause and adoration make the young lord blush with excessive joy. After the ceremony ends, he humorously accepts his new status, the beloved idol of the entire village. A massive material gathering festival starts in Panamura marvels just as her new sword became sharper. Van explains that he created a unique blade specifically for collecting monster parts. Panamura is shocked when she learns that he made over 100 swords for each of the soldiers. With a radiant and jealous smile, he offers to make one for her for 5 gold. His joking business proposal seems funny and at the same time impresses the powerful Bikin. Thanks to the soldiers, Panamura gathers materials for the dragon at an impressive speed. After the young man's return, he is shocked by the incredible new wall built in his village. Rango's companion warns, the wall is only the beginning of all the surprises. The young man freezes without words, not understanding what could be even more impressive. Van meets the merchants who have returned. They bow respectfully before their young lord. Rango talks about the impressive caravan gathered at the request of the commerce president. His large entourage holds merchants, adventurers, and slaves as auxiliary staff. Van is impressed by the scale of the team and agrees to show them the new storage facilities. He goes ahead while the large caravan clatters and enters the newly fortified village. A sudden piercing cry of shock sounds from behind the caravan. One of the traders exclaims in amazement it is hard to believe. He has just noticed the huge body of a dragon. Rango and Van direct their gazes to the source of the commotion in the endless warehouse. The newly arrived merchants babble in surprise, not believing what they see. Rango's gaze quickly flashes with a greedy smile as he assesses the potential profit. His vile seller's smile emerges as he calculates the selling price: 150 platforms. An incredible figure of 10 billion yen explodes in Van's head, a feeling as if he won the lottery. Van, still stunned by the amount, asks for clarification on how the auction proceeds. Ringo says that this is a grand auction in the capital for goods at the level of national treasures. Rango listens carefully while Van confirms they will carve out insane profits. Rango praises Van's attentiveness, unlike other nobles who shamelessly skim the cream off the profits. He clenches his fist, declaring their previous profit was already worth risking their own lives. Van quietly processes the scale of the business prospects now before him. Staring at Van, Rango throws out a sharp proposal to create their own company. Van Wonder admits that founding a company will be a difficult task. His companions are amazed. In such a remote place, there actually exists a whole thriving village. Suddenly, a group of rival merchants from Merry Chamber of Commerce arrives. They insidiously impose the idea on Van. Supposedly, they should open a branch store to support his development. The leader puffs out his chest and promises to buy materials at the highest price. Van immediately gets to the point and asks how much they are asking for the dragon materials. They lower the price and promise future preferences to sweeten the deal. They immediately see their plan and understand the short-sighted and predatory strategy. He realizes they don't care about the future development of the village and its potential. Their only goal is colossal profit from a single unprecedented trade. With a radiant, disarming smile, he cheerfully waves them off and, kindly stating that he will think about it, sends them away. As he walks away, the merchants call after him, thinking he is naive. They think he might not understand. The dragon can be sold for less than they offered. Brother Rango shudders when Rango casts a heavy look, realizing that 80 platinums is too little. The companion insists top-level materials are definitely worth more than 100. The wild merry merchants go mad, shouting that no one would buy at such a price. Rango intervenes and conducts training for his people. Only justified assessments are needed, and without excessive confidence. He explains the safeguards of auctions, minimum contract prices, and repeated listings of items. The true mettle of this merchant, as he says, is revealed in how he reduces risks, say, from robbery. The leader merry merchant grabs Rango and tries to forcibly coerce him into cooperation. Van watches their insidious agreement and understands. He hears every word. Rango's brother fixes his gaze, and on his face is a quiet, unwavering determination. Rango himself confidently and silently nods, refusing to be frightened by threats. He states that he and his brother would never do such a vile thing for 1 platinum. A rival merchant slams his fist on the table, threatening them with expulsion from the chamber. Van admits that their public quarrel ruined the entire image of trade. He approaches them and persistently hints it is not worth pushing away a potentially valuable client, one like him. The brothers express their outrage over the greed and stupidity of their opponents. Rango declares that he no longer feels any loyalty and will become an independent merchant. He explains 3 conditions for founding a company, including Noble's recommendation. Van understands the first two conditions are met, but the recommendation is an insurmountable obstacle. He explains the system of noble sponsorship and the necessary financial reward. This system gives nobles the opportunity to earn huge profits while doing almost nothing. He asks the brothers what typical reward is given to nobles for their support. One of the brothers looks surprised at how well Van knows the norms of noble common sense. Van admits that payment is required, which varies depending on rank. This is a very high barrier. He asks a chilling question, which noble advised their powerful rival. With a grim face he shows, it is none other than the royal family of Belrenet. Two brothers exhale together, resigned to this terrible news in silent defeat. While the rival firm is well established, the company will inevitably become stronger and larger thanks to the support of the monarchy. Good service will reinforce their image and bring them even more respected supporters. Van Muses says that when royalties are preferred, it is essentially fraud against the system. His companions add that Mary Corporation has the best real estate everywhere. A scandalous rumor emerges. The founder was the lover of an ancient king from the dynasty. Van Grimace understands that the situation is worsening more and more. He believes that other companies may become vulnerable. They can be easily exposed by competitors. He finds hope in the broad international connections of the Merchant Guild. Rango confirms that their international status and funds are not a problem. Van brings them back to the central problem, advice from a noble. He says that the father severed all ties and the brother has no noble title. A heavy sigh and doomed silence escape him as he contemplates that they have no options. Suddenly Rango's face lights up. He remembers his only noble ally, Count Panemura. Van playfully teases the brothers for their sudden crazy excitement. Rango grabs his brother and pulls him forward decisively to find out the quantity, while Van worries about her. Panemura, looking bold and confident, dryly says she doesn't mind helping. Van's question shakes the woman's confidence with a confused expression, but she laughs confidently. Josterang, teaching her training soldiers, advises him to consider her special situation. Van understands even royal persons have problems and realizes she has nothing to lose. She thinks that it is precisely her commoner origin that makes her think about how to subtly annoy them. Panemura explains that her lack of land forces her to resort to showy actions to attract the support of the common people. It is a profitable deal for her, a perfect chance for a triumphant exit. Van rejoices, realizing that this plan will not let his family find out about his actions. Panemura warns, conquering the main dragon will attract the attention of the higher nobility. She considers his anxiety excessive for a child, though she acknowledges her own worries. Considering his youth, she notes that he is, after all, still just a child. With a cutting smile, she offers to teach him a way to avoid any involvement. Van looks stunned at her offer and asks if she has a plan. She nods. The plan is simple. Panemura reveals his grand solution. He must become a noble and found a new house. She casually rewrites the story, saying as if he defeated the dragon and she did almost nothing. In panic, Van accuses her of changing the story just so he would look noticeable. She is cool. He asks what the problem is, and Vanso's inner essence looks as if she is fine, even with her bust. Van says he is afraid his father and brothers will cause him trouble. Panemura confidently states that killing the dragon at 8 guarantees him nobility. The weight of her words hangs in the air for a moment of transition. She presents the result as entirely positive, winning money and a new corporation. Pan American notices that she understands why he feels insecure in this situation. Rango appears with a creepy smile and declares that he has burned all their rivals. Panemura drily advises him to use his ballista to kill his enemies. Van says that if they take all the laurels for themselves, Rango will not be able to make a name for himself. Panemura's sharp gaze narrows as she addresses the young man before her. Rango asks if the great Panemura Carlocane really cares about him. Beside the wolf's howl, she snorts, despising the very thought of care. She laughs, playfully grabs the spotted rangy Rango, and jokes that she will eat him. Panemura generously offers this time to give him the honor to help him grow. After Rango gained strength, he asked Van if he could sell materials for 130 platinum coins. Van gives a joyful all right, closing the deal with a bright, happy smile. The negotiations are declared successful. The merchants look relieved and satisfied. Later, Van explains Panemura's condition and demands a share in his future business as a baron. Rival merchants mock their slowness and are confident, without their help they will fail. Van draws up his sly but reliable plan to use the despair of the opponents. He suggests asking Ortho for escort, but Panemura rejects this idea. Panemura insists on going to capital to help him appeal to the nobility. Van chokes with joy. Finally, he realizes he no longer has to worry about people or security. He expresses his gratitude, confident that everything will be fine with her powerful help. Panemura blushes from his praise, a rare sight that shocks Van and his companion. He happily announces that a festival will be held on the way to the capital. He asks if it is possible, and Rango assures he will prepare a large carriage. Preparation for their great journey begins with a feeling of excitement. They show a large, specially made carriage wheel, a hint at the size of the carriage itself. The bed of the colossal carriage contains a huge bundle covered with a blanket. Van and his friend freeze in amazement before the colossal platform carriage, built from light wood. Panemura explains that they will pull it with her strong, fast war horses. The massive cart rumbles and breaks the silence, rushing down the road with incredible speed and power. A foreign merchant with his small caravan slowly makes his way through the desolate mountains. Among the smuggler traders, the network boldly waited for the Van's group to make a foolish mistake. They are annoyed by the very thought of selling dragon materials in such a remote place. The leading trader is confident they will come begging them for a caravan. Their truck shakes wildly as an invisible transport catches up with them. A huge cart harnessed to a mighty horse rumbles and rushes past their small wagon. The shopkeepers freeze in shock, not believing their own eyes. Could this really be the carriage of some nobleman? They recognize the unicorn on the flag's coat of arms and are overwhelmed by absolute horror. One of them pokes Rango with a leash, confirming their worst fears. Panemura drives alongside, and her long hair majestically flutters in the wind. Her determined facial expression is shown in close-up as she looks ahead. The merchants recognize her as a rising star and panic, exchanging glances wondering why she is here at all. Their plan to break Belle and Rango through logistics control has completely failed. With despair, they realize their efforts threaten them with colossal loss. The inability to deliver 40 Armadale items violates their guild contract. They argue whether to apologize and ask for help, but their leader rejects the idea. The leader of the mustache decides to lie and claim he was deceived. With a grim expression, he gives the order: their broken caravan must return back. The beaten merchants begin a long, shameful journey back to the capital. Their failed gambit leaves a bitter aftertaste in the air. 3 merchants look completely broken and frightened because of their misfortune. The consequences of their greed and pride are about to unfold. The new chapter introduces King Scuderia Dino and Sorable Rinnet. The narrative tells about his military reforms, where the main focus is on the power of weapons. These reforms are described as a long and exhausting process for the kingdom. The king's new policies have wildly reshaped the political landscape. An explanation of the old system, where noblemen were given positions of power. As a result, talentless sons from noble families lost their positions. The political balance shifted. Houses like Count Ferdinando's lost power. The lord is drowning in despair because the influence of his house is rapidly declining. Conversely, houses with military capability like Marquis Fertio's quickly rose. Panemura walks through the lavish hall, contemplating the new political reality. She recalls her own exhausting training after she was transferred to accounting. Her relentless dedication led to her becoming a platoon commander. Her valor in the war against Yelenita earned her the rank of captain at 16 years old. After 6 years, she was strangely immediately promoted to Viscount by the king himself. A voice from the past noted that they thought she would come here. Count Ferdinando expected that she would use her new awards to petition for a promotion in rank. In the throne room, King Dino questions her why she wants to grant the title to someone else. The king's face is sharp, majestic, authoritative, and full of distrust. Panemura explains that the lord protects a remote village and could not come to court. The king's interest flared, and he wondered what could have earned a military decoration. She stuns the entire court by revealing that the lord killed a dragon. Find out if a real magician can kill a dragon. The king leans forward, his curiosity finally turning into intent and command to find out who he is. Panemura reveals her name: Van Ferdo, an 8-year-old hero and dragon slayer. The king is stunned. The marquis did not report this. Panemura confirms that he is unaware. She tells how Van arrived at the village under attack and wiped out the bandits. The king is delighted and in front of everyone notes the boy's ability at such a young age. The court grows noisy, people are confused, while she tells how he fortified the village. She lists his small strength and humbly states that she was only on the path. Finally, she declares that it was the power of Lord Vanon that decided everything. Count Ferdinando looks intently at Panemura, showing complete distrust, and demands proof. Calmly adds that they still have materials from 40 armored lizards. This incredible statement rolls through the court in a wave of surprised whispers. The sharp click of the king's saber echoes in the hall, commanding immediate silence. Panemura explains, the testimonies of the residents confirm that the boy took control of the battle. In a private conversation, the count hints to the king that the boy is being manipulated. The king rejects this and states that he trusts Panemura to investigate any doubts. With a heavy sigh, the count admits, the truth will be verified very soon. Panemura received a stern warning about the consequences of deception. She invites the king to see for himself the incredible achievements of Juan. Intrigued, the king declares that he wants to meet Veniford as soon as possible. A giant petrified dragon head has stopped it is being dragged through the streets of the capital. A crowd of hundreds of voices gathers further and further, completely captivated by the incredible spectacle. People recognize Lady Panemura as soon as she makes her way through the crowd. The whisper of the spectators, is the hero Marcafordio really his son? The crowd buzzes with disbelief. How could a child fall on a dragon? Panemura announces that Van's dragon-slaying medal will be awarded later. Choking with emotions, Rango announces that he will name his company after himself. As soon as his brother is reminded, he emotionally dedicates the company name to him. He quickly decides to officially register it as the company Bell Ringo. In the following days, the incredible news continued to spread rapidly. The story of the new company and the new baron became a legend. They became the hottest topic throughout the royal capital. Details of the heroic stunt in full swing. The boy cut off the dragon, claiming it was cornered. The story changed each time. Now they said he held a giant sword in his hands. The legend ends with him cutting off the dragon's head with one blow. Panemura admits rumors grow over time and her own role was exaggerated. Looking out the carriage window, she thinks the boy should be grateful. The moon with surplus. After Panemura left, the village had already changed. The surrounding landscape near the village changed, thanks to their tireless, persistent work. The villagers completed a formidable rampart, pouring it with a large ballast dye. Ordinary houses were rebuilt into more stylish ones, and the village became even more beautiful. During this period, 2 magnificent new towers were also erected. The sun brightly reflects off the impressive new structures under the clear sky. The diagram shows that Vans prefers high places and strategic views. The knight looks up with incredible admiration. Oligoter turned out to be also such that one can climb. He decides that the tired soldiers will climb the opposite tower for training. Van watches them go, impressed by their enthusiasm and inexhaustible energy. The long climb to the tower turns out to be a real bumpy road. While the scene climbed up the stairs, it constantly accelerated, energetically quite impressive. Van, gasping, admits when they reach the summit he will no longer be able to move. Finally reaching the summit, the whole team exhales with relief together. Van, Til and Compson stand nearby, holding formation in their domain. Meanwhile, the land stretches endlessly, only for 100 inhabitants. Ven proudly suggests naming their growing settlement Van Town. Til teases him, sure that he is just joking with the name. Suddenly Sharp Eyes notices something moving in the distant landscape. He explains that his vision has noticeably improved, unlike Van's. He notices a group of children and elderly people approaching the village. Til suggests having lunch while they wait for the guests to arrive. Van excitedly shares the news about the prospect of his favorite sandwiches. While they eat, a young girl is seen hastily approaching her place. Arta rushes to them and calls Lord Vaughn with urgent anxiety. Unable to reach the capital, Art lives in the village. Van greets the girl who is breathing heavily, asks what happened, and calls her Lady Art. He notes to himself, did he forget her title because she is still a child? A parental impulse to stroke her head awakens in him, and he does it gently. A simple, sincere, sweet action makes the Art hold its breath and it blushes, burning fiercely. Van is enchanted by her reaction and calls her a sweet creature to himself. Clenching her dress, Art shyly gives him permission to call her by name. He notices her struggle with titles and thinks she is incredibly sweet. He asked what she came to tell him after he called her Art. She stammers and says that she is worried specifically about the arriving strangers. She takes a deep breath, gathering courage to speak. Artie expresses his concern about the lack of protection in the village itself. Van agrees they must meet the guests at his home to evaluate them. Quickly join and enthusiastically volunteer with some of this team in Esparta. He tears away with incredible speed, full of boundless energy. Van Muse is now in the new building on the 2, like endurance training. He thinks that Kamzin is undergoing hellish D training voluntarily. Fierce rivalry with comrades pushes him to train even harder. Young warriors squeeze everything out of themselves to the last physical limit. Van feels the gap in endurance growing between them and himself. They are already whispering and admiring, noting what an incredible Thompson. Kamsan reports that the delegates have arrived and will be taken to the room. The gray-haired man nervously stands and asks if this is Sitabalage. He silently contemplates the unfamiliar name, and a thoughtful expression appears on his face. The old man looks confusedly at the strange, large city that has appeared before him. Van asks Sparta if he knows a place called Cedar Village. Sparta flinches from the sudden realization this place already has a name. A memory of Van's antics comes to him and irritation grows increasingly. He still remembers how Van tricked him with subliminal tactics to make him name the village. When Sparta looks intently and irritably narrows his gaze, the man is asking again about Van Village. The old man notices nothing, moving at full speed and with relief, confident that he is in the right place. He notices how much the village has changed since his childhood. Hearing Ispartha's sharp tone, the man recalls his goal. He explains that his people came from a neighboring village to find shelter. Van considers all the difficulties of immigration and asks why they are coming. The man explains that their village cannot pay taxes, but the count does not care. They bypass the nearby towns, preferring to join the territory of the Marquis. Van falls into a deep, thoughtful silence weighing his options. He is torn by a contradiction. He wants to help but fears the political consequences. The old man begged him and asked if he would take them. Van offers them food, shelter, and no taxes, asking only for hard work in return. He learns that they have brought 13 people, but more than 300 still remain. The grateful man gives his 3-year-old granddaughter into service. Van is openly outraged by how this world treats human lives lightly, as if incidentally. He offers a cart, but the man replies that they have their own cows. The man clarifies that their cows can pull their own load on the way back as well. When cows and milk are mentioned, pure joy flashes in Van's eyes. Delighted by the prospect of cows, Van generously offers the mayor housing and escort. A close-up shows the old man's face. He is contorted in complete shock and disbelief. He forcefully lowers his palm and the old man makes a stunning statement. He is not the mayor. A group of newly arrived peasants freeze in shared reverence, examining the place before them. A huge house towers before them. They notice it is even bigger than the lord's estate. A young boy cannot believe it and aloud wonders if the lord himself will rearrange the houses. Van announces the upcoming welcome party, and this greatly surprises the tired villagers. With a confident expression, Van calmly boasts that his own style is better than any furniture. While he is being questioned, Van delegates carry out tasks preparing everything and managing the comsom for the newcomers. Suddenly, Van is struck by an epiphany. He internally understands how many artists are counted for Nato's daughter. He casually explains to Art his decision to provide food and shelter for the destitute peasants who are barely holding on. Art praises his kindness, confident from now on the peasants under his care will live wonderfully. The gaze of the young lord becomes serious and tense as he weighs his next words. 2 months later, he directly asked Art what she thinks about the village and her future. The spontaneously blushing artist quietly admits that she truly believes staying will indeed make her happier. Acknowledging their youth, Van gently suggests postponing the conversation about marriage. Art Gass then utters a touching, confessional admission about her desire to marry Lord Van. Completely frozen and stunned, Van asks if she really seriously wants to marry. A wave of mutual embarrassment covers them, confused and speechless. Van, panicking somewhere inside, reminds himself, a gentleman must not humiliate or put a lady in an awkward position. Leaning in very close, he whispers her advice to pretend as if he never heard her confession. He mumbles to himself, trying to process the incredibly awkward, yet pleasant situation. Art points to her strange walk but cheerfully insists that she is just overthinking. With joyful bravado, he reflects that men are creatures who glow with happiness when they are loved. Details of the new village architecture show the progress they have achieved. Stomping heavily, a man named Ortha announces his return to the rural courtyard. The villagers panic, calling out and asking why he is covered in blood. Laughing through exhaustion, he reveals that he found the entrance to the dungeon. Van and his companion quietly freeze in surprise as soon as they hear the word dungeon. In a wide shot, silhouettes of villagers overflowing with the magnificent discovery are visible. The initial surprise quickly turns into a state of complete, shared, total panic. This discovery is a terrible event that attracts monsters, traitors, and fortune seekers. Advice looms over the young lord, the advisor hovers, and worry is read on his face before this terrible new reality. The man in glasses, chastened, explains the urgent need to report the dungeon to the capital. Young Van regrets the unfortunate timing but agrees, it must be reported quickly. The old man, with a clear gaze, comprehends how much preparation is needed for the coming influx. Lord Van offers a horse, ordering the scout to deliver the report to the capital. The chosen scout Kyuzala is shocked and shouts in disbelief when he himself is sent on the mission. Van explains since Kyuzala is the scout, it means he was the one who found him. A woman expresses concern, and another man offers a reward, one large gold coin. Van offers Kyuzala a valuable mithril sword, and she remains noticeably cornered and set up. Kyuzala's friends burst out in playful protest. They pick on him for the unfair solitary mission. With their missions, Ortho's party and Kyuzala set out on different roads. His mood has improved. Kyuzala happily rides through the forest, humming a cheerful tune. He likes the excellent grip of this sword. He praises the fine taste in the weapon of his young master. At dusk, the lone traveler sets up camp and settles by the fire near ancient ruins. He continues his journey through the vast, barren expanse of the jagged mountains. Again admiring the sword, he thinks the rest of his path will pass unnoticed. Suddenly, the clear clinking of a wheel, which is drumming, cuts into the calm journey. The rider's horse rears back in fear, revealing the overturned carriage blocking the road ahead. A terrible scene unfolds right before the eyes. Monsters devouring reach the carriages with dead passengers and begin a feast. From his hiding place, Kyuzala recognizes the terrible scene as the work of masters. He reflects on what creatures give birth to alien creations when they are eaten by direct impulses. The monsters burn with bloodthirstiness. Their gazes are fixed only on the victims in the carriages. He acknowledges that orcs are usually tough opponents and prepares for battle. A confident smile spreads across his face. He knows now they are zero to him. With a loud battle cry, he sharply rushes right into the middle of the orcs. His body smears into a streak of motion as he launches a swift, deadly attack. Growling beasts are caught by surprise and sharply turn to look at their attacker. He mounts the back of one beast and drives his sword deep into its powerful body. Warrior Koli notices that his monster rival has no real combat skill. He immediately sharply turns the blade and with incredible force pierces the second orc with it. He admires the sword Lord Van, impressed by its power, and admits that he could get used to it. The rescued woman approaches, her cloak fluttering, and she thanks him for the help. He panics, denying her assumption that he is a high-ranking person on a mission. Barely smiling, she accepts his explanation and prepares to continue on her way. The woman named Flammeria Bose says that she cannot repay the debt now, but will definitely express her gratitude later. The adventurous Kyuzala offers allow her to ride his horse, and she agrees easily and gracefully. With a light chuckle, Flammeria admits that she is actually 30 years old. A brief moment of transition flashed by as soon as they set off together towards their path. Kyuzala jokes that she has a flat figure, then asks where she is heading in the capital. Her face is distorted with sorrow as she explains that her guide suddenly ran away. After this, he asks why she is going to the city alone. Flammeria reveals her father, the Baron, died in battle and her house was ruined. Cringing with shame, she expresses regret for having shown her trouble so openly. Kyuzala calms her, explaining that she understands her situation, saying she is also a free bird. He makes a touching promise to the protector and sincerity moves her to tears. A loud announcement about a new dungeon discovery will sound in the Adventurers Guild. Official data indicates that it is located in a village where the famous Baron Van Nefertio lives. The crowd learns that the guild plans to establish a new branch in a promising location. To encourage exploration, all materials from this area will be bought at an increased price. Special rewards are promised for mapping the dungeon and sending travelers into frenzy. The excited crowd surrounds Kyuzala and storms her, demanding details about the dungeon and the slain dragon. Suddenly, he is overwhelmed, declares he is busy, and announces that he is going home. The fire does not flare up, but the export train rushes in pursuit, and the whole maw with gills gives chase, greedy for prey. After purchasing supplies, they find themselves in the role of guides leading a huge caravan away from the capital. In the carriage, Flamera openly rejoices and thanks Kyuzala for everything. He looks at her softly and encouragingly. Kyuzala tells her that she will find this village interesting and that her smile will become even brighter. Flammeria looks at him warmly and says that she is looking forward to it. The long caravan stretches out, full of tired but determined travelers who keep on the path. One traveler suggests that Kyuzala took the most direct route to test his new mithril sword. The stern leader gives the order, make the dissatisfied subordinate return to his place. For now, the travelers quietly converse among themselves and complain about the recent harshness of their leaders. One woman is shocked by the incredible number of villagers who decided to relocate. A man contemplates the harsh reality of life in remote, impoverished villages. He knows the decision to leave behind their entire world was not an easy one. The injured man extends support to the woman as she staggers from exhaustion. The woman voices her doubt, seeing futility and despair in this step. The wounded man promises his doubtful companion that their distant goal is a true paradise. The man with a noticeable scar shouts in triumph announced their arrival, and the woman nearby expressed complete incomprehension. At the noisy banquet, young Lord Vonnen extends a hospitable welcome to the newcomers and announces that they have reached Shite village. He explains that the barbecue is held to foster friendship between new and old residents. After the celebration, he promises everyone they will be taken to new homes for the night. The new mayor Superv bows deeply in gratitude, while Van introduces himself and welcomes the arrivals. Van greets a traveler named Ortho, who modestly brushes off his heroism, saying it's just ordinary work. Then he tells about his panic encounter with 10 huge 3-eyed Triclops boars from the lakeshore. A young boy, stunned after the fight, barely asked for food, while another man laughed about their amazing rescue by a ballista. A capable girl named Till takes the helm and commands, "Let her companions prepare soup and meat for the children." The children stared mesmerized at the feast, and one whispers that a single plate of food is more than she sees in a week. With a radiant smile, Van encourages everyone, "Eat to your fill, there is enough food for everyone." A woman and Van eat together with someone shares a quiet moment amid the lively communal feast. Overwhelmed with emotions, the woman begins to sob and through tears whispers that the food is extraordinarily delicious. The entire community, from the elderly to the very young, at the joyful feast shares with each other, their faces filled with radiance. Van watches over his happy people with a gentle, satisfied smile, alongside faithful companions. He reflects on his own happiness and rejoices that his hard work preparing for the newcomers has paid off. His thoughts reveal everything went smoothly until the neighboring villagers appeared. Van reveals his grand new plan to build a temporary town for adventures. The story says that the 8-year-old leader, Van, worked the hardest of all. The advice points to the urgent need to build housing for the numerous travelers who are already arriving. The dark transitional moment marks the beginning of a large new construction project. Van imagines the city ins for travelers and wonders if anyone has ever dared to build a city in just 1 month. With a focused gaze, he begins to organize the details of his grand plan. He calculates that 10 tall buildings and several shops will be enough to accommodate about 400 people. The plan also includes a 5-meter rampart ramp and 15 fortified defensive ballast shelters for protection. A tall, mighty figure named Esparta looms over Van and agrees that preparing a new village is a good idea. Esparta apologizes for barging in earlier, then raises critically important administrative questions about new businesses. Van weighs the logistics and concludes that managing the ends and keeping supplies himself will be more profitable. He proposes appointing store managers so they can jointly run the city and provide more vigilant oversight. When Esparta hints at an alternative, founding the chivalric order, which could keep men named D under control, the conversation again turns to people's safety and the need to snoop at night among mercenaries. Esparta decisively declares that he transfers the role of magistrate to Van. He confirms that he will find the city leader, and Van questions the need for 2 separate night orders. With a seductive smile, Van suggests that Team D will handle the current order for Shite. Pakosno asks Esparta if this is revenge, feigning naive childish innocence to drive his advisor to despair. A young girl named Art, tastefully dressed, timidly approaches Vaughn and asks if she can join him. Van agrees, apologizing for his manners. He plans to eat on the go and observe the villagers. 2 of Van's companions, the impatient Thompson and the smiling Till, watch the interaction. They both enthusiastically agreed to join Vaughn and Art during their banquet walk. Then this small group of 4 sets off to meet the vibrators for introductions and greetings. Van looks at the noisy banquet and immediately notices a practical problem. There are not enough chairs for everyone. Noticing a sturdily built man, Van asked him to bring 3 chairs for their group. Thanking the man, Van leans forward and offers him a position in Nushevel recorder. The man is stunned by the offer. He bows low and with a trembling voice mumbles that he will think about it. Satisfied with the rapid recruitment, Van decides to invite any other warriors he sees who look capable. A group of women approaches Van, explains that they have no savings and asks if there is any work. He reassures them, offers work managing new shops or sowing and plowing fields. The women admit that they have no experience in trade matters, so they speak frankly about their concerns. Van promises them a bunch of different jobs, from working with customers and cleaning to other vacancies. He tells them not to worry about complicated finances. He will hire an accountant to handle everything. The elderly man's voice trembles with emotion. He tells how the arrival of trucks saved their village from ruin. He closes his eyes and admits he had no idea he would live a life full of such smiles and joy. With tears in their eyes, the villagers watch as the old man expresses hope that Van will smile with them. Van declares that this is only the beginning, and the crowd erupts in applause, swearing loyalty and hard work. Now this village is a place overflowing with energy and hope, where survival has given way to joy. Van makes a solemn statement and orders his people to gather and build a new city.